Commissioner Caviero.
Aye.
Commissioner Gibson.
Aye.
Commissioner Hamilton.
Aye.
Commissioner Herbert.
Aye.
Commissioner Pickett.
Aye.
And Commissioners Feinbaum and Simpson Brown are not here. So unanimous election of Chair Pro Tem for the pendency of this meeting is Commissioner Hamilton.
I started to ask if I could vote no, but I didn't think that was probably appropriate. So, thank you all. The next item is roll call. You've already noted which commissioners are absent, so we will go from there. The first item on our agenda is approval of the minutes. We have our March 21st, 2024 minutes. Those were sent out to you prior to this. Do we have a motion and a second?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right, minutes are approved. There is no other official action for the board today. But before we adjourn the board meeting and begin our budget workshop, is there any other business or comments from the commissioners that we need to address? Hearing none, I don't believe there are any members who wish to address the board today. There are not. So, we will now adjourn the board meeting and we will begin the budget workshop. I'm going to recognize Gabe to introduce and kick off our FY 2025 budget workshop. We will proceed through the items in the workshop. We hope that we will finish by noon today. And we may call a break about midway through. If anybody wants to take a break any sooner than that, you can slip me a note and let me know, and I will take a break for everybody. Or if you need, I'll also say if you want to step up and get some refreshments, we have a nice refreshment stand over against the wall there. Feel free. So, Gabe, I'm turning it now over to you.
Thank you, Chair Pro Tem Hamilton. I had to say it one time because I've never said that before. Before I begin this morning, I know most of you know that our longtime security person, concierge, greeter, doer of all things in this building, Howard Mitchell, is retiring after 22 years and 3 months as a person in this building who's been a part of this company for a long time. So I want to make sure I recognize him real quick. He doesn't like recognition, but I'm giving it to him anyway. I think he just left, in fact. But I appreciate his service for 22 years at KUB, and particularly the Millers building, keeping it what it is for us. All right, we can begin today. Let me clicker to work here. There you go. This is the fiscal year 25 budget this year. Appreciate you all carving out a large part of your day to do this. This is always an annual thing we do in April, but this year we had to prepare a lot of things for you all, given what's going on in the nation as far as inflation and just supply chain things we've seen. So looking forward to giving you all an update on things, and you'll hear from a lot of our folks about the details of that plan. And feel free to ask questions throughout the presentation. Always begin with our blueprint. I rolled this out to you all last year. We try to make sure all the things we do at KB meet those vision, mission, and values, and that's a balance. A lot of things are on there that we'll talk about later, but safe, reliable, and affordable services, all those are very important, and they at times compete with each other, but they are very important we maintain that balance, and so I'll discuss those in greater detail in a minute. Before we begin, I want to give you a fiscal year 24 update. The year is almost coming to an end. We got 2.5 months left in this fiscal year, and we've already accomplished a lot of things. We continue to have award-winning performance. We received a lot of awards this year, in particular for our safety, workforce development, that new BEHRC project out there at MBW has won an award. We've gotten awards for our communications and marketing, and we've got our 22nd year, 22nd anniversary, whatever you want to call it, Treeline USA Award. So all those things are very important. We will talk about a new one today. John will be sharing with you a new award we just received recently, and we have 5 others in the works. And so we continue to benchmark ourselves against our peers and against the nation on what we're doing well, and we're doing a lot of things really well, and I'm proud of the folks who do this every day for us. Operational achievements, as you've heard all these projects throughout this last 8-9 months. We opened up and put in service our new Western Avenue in-feed substation Dr. Pickett got to tour it just a few weeks ago. It was a big our 10th in feed from TVA, gives us a lot of capacity, a lot of redundancy, especially as our system continues to grow. So that really leverages really well for the future. Water plant filters project is about almost halfway. It's our largest project in the history of KUB at $65 million. We were able to drive by there. It's a lot of construction going on, and that project will finish up next summer and be in service. You remember a presentation we did this past year about a failure under the river at Boyd's Bridge and how our folks responded and basically got that temporarily back in service in less than 3 weeks. That was a major project. We have a final capital project we'll talk about later to make that permanent, but it really gave us a lot of flexibility there in the short term. We actually moved a large major gas line on Lovell Road in anticipation of TDOT widening the road. We have actually finished that project ahead of them, and that was a major deal. It gave us a lot of new pipe, new capacity, and growth for that area. Our call center numbers are getting better every day. If you see the numbers, we're really knocking it out of the park there. Our folks have really embraced that. We've added more folks in that department to make sure our customers have a great response time and a great experience with that. Solar Access, community solar is up and running. We're now over 92% subscribed. That's way above what we thought we'd be at this point. So that just shows you that the people really wanted it, and it's serving us really well, and it's doing a great job. And then this past January, one of the coldest snaps in the history of Knoxville, and our system performed extremely well. In fact, that new Western Avenue substation couldn't have timed it any better. Was needed there during that week, and so we were able to get through that with very, very minor problems with our system, and it really proved that our system is built strong for the future. We are making some projects on strategic initiatives. I talked about strategic initiatives. I presented those to you last month. I'll talk about those, but they are things like making sure our fiber grows, make sure our workforce is developed, and make sure our electric systems are going strong. As you know, this past year we spent a good year building this inflation response plan. We put together folks from every department in the company throughout the organization just to review our operations, our capital projects, make sure we are aligned with what we need to be doing going forward. And they spent a long time just, where can we cut, where can we save, but also what do we need to get back to as far as levels of replacement. Obviously, that's been the biggest push. We looked at our long-term funding scenarios, and you've seen some of those already. We'll talk about those in great detail here shortly. We also pursued a lot of grants. There's a lot of federal, state, and local monies. We have pursued a lot of those. We have gotten some of those. We're hoping to hear from some more in the future, but as of right now, we are in a good spot. But we are going after every dollar that's given out that we can find that we qualify for. As I mentioned earlier, our blueprint values are very critical. As I mentioned, this is all about our customers. We want to make sure we have safe, reliable, and affordable powers, considering everybody's needs. When we do this, anytime we do rate action, it's a big deal at KUB, and we take it very seriously. We also want to provide industry-leading services. It's critical. So it's that whole balance of things that we look at as an organization, as a company, and we do a really good job of that. And so you'll hear in great detail today some of the things we've learned and want to provide to our customers going forward. So, as I mentioned, you've heard about this for basically the last 6 months in a row to some degree. We came to you in November with our first draft of a proposal to you all. You had great questions, comments. We've listened to that. We've adjusted some things with that. We did a follow-up presentation again in January with what our latest at that time was a version of that. We then went to our community advisory panel and presented the same thing that you all saw to them, and they gave us some great feedback and understood what we needed to do and why we needed to do it. We did our final reviews in March, and then we are here today with you all to give the final draft of the proposed budget for next year and really the next 5 years. As we have talked about, inflation has had a huge impact on us. If you remember back to a presentation John Williams did a few months ago, we brought you in just kind of examples of things that have just almost doubled in some cases and tripled in price. And while that has stopped growing, it has not gone back down. It is stabilized. That's the good news about it. But what used to cost $100 now costs $200 for the exact same item. And that's just real. All of our peers are feeling it. We're feeling it across the industry. Some of you in the private sector are feeling it in your business. It's just real. I would hope it goes back down, but I don't foresee it ever happening. And so we've got to plan for that and adjust accordingly. Century 2 has been awesome. You'll see a lot of data of what we've accomplished over the last 15 years. We are driving numbers that were bad to good and improving our reliability and services to our customer. And so we want to continue doing that. I mean, it's proven to be a big asset and big lift for us. We lost some ground the last few years because of COVID and things. We deferred rate increases or we lowered them because of our customers' needs. And so we lost some ground, but we're not, we want to catch that up. And it's not a bad thing to do that. It's just we need to catch back up and do some more miles of pipe and more poles to make sure we maintain that high level of service. Debt capacity, Mark talks about this a lot. We've leveraged that really well in the past, but we don't have unlimited borrowing ability to borrow our way out of this. And so we're going to leverage it a little bit more, but we are hitting a point where we need to kind of cap that and not go any further up on our borrowing. But we've used it well and we'll continue to use it going forward. But rate increases are needed in all divisions. And I guess there's some good news. Our water and wastewater are in line with what we've been telling you for the last 3 or 4 years. They're exactly what they were back then. But electric and gas will require some larger shifts just because of the cost of doing business and a lot of that's inflationary hitting us and in returning back to normal Century 2 levels. And so we'll talk about that at length today. Once again, all questions are welcome and we will gladly answer those as we go forward. So I'll give you a preview. Like last year, we presented a one-year budget because we were in the middle of starting this inflation response plan. So last year was a one-year budget for this year that we're in. But this year, we're actually talking about this next year plus the next 4. And so you'll see a 5-year plan of things we're going to be doing. Next year's budget is $1.2 billion, which is a 6% increase over last year. A capital budget almost nearly $300 million next year. And we'll leverage that with $111 million of new bonds. So that's where we're getting some of the funding to help those big capital projects. O&M is up $21 million. And then like I said before, we are looking for rate increases. We did have to adjust the electric rate increase in fiscal year 27 by 1% from 1 to 2. We'll talk about that also and explain what happened, why that is, and some detail there. But overall, a very strong budget. It's hard to say the word billion, but that's what we've reached, a few years ago with that every year, because we are a large utility and we are growing. If you drive around Knoxville, or even if you can drive around Knoxville at times, it's growing at a good clip, and so we're investing a lot of investments in our system to make it ready for those customers and also reliable for the future. I presented this to you a few months ago. This is next year's strategic initiatives. I won't read those in detail. They pretty much are, grow fiber. We're going to cross the halfway point in summer of 25, a big milestone for us. We mentioned to you one of the areas we're figuring out is the multi-dwelling units, apartments and condos. We are really going to focus on that and talk about things, and Jamie presents that later on with what we're going to do to get that area tapped and served. In our workforce development, everybody in the world is talking about workforce, and we got to make sure we retain and maintain our great folks, but also grow in our next leaders. A lot of folks are retiring. Great for them, but we got to make sure those next folks are ready to go and invest in that training, leadership type of stuff. So we want to continue doing that going forward. And then our electric system strategy, we talk about it a lot. The grid is growing. The grid is expected to be more resilient, be more reliable. Technology is increasing there. I was at a presentation on Tuesday, and the things we're doing and involving, it's amazing, the intelligence, if you want to call it, of the grid, and making sure it's resilient for our customers. It's growing. That's a good thing. And then also really just tapping into that 5% flexibility. I've made this comment. For 84 years of KUB's existence, we weren't allowed to build generation. And TVA, as part of their partnership, is allowed us to do 5%, which is about 80 megawatts, 60 to 80 megawatts, depending on what you build. We want to tap into that this next year and see what we can do to build our own generation for our customers. So we've got a lot of movement on that area. So those are our initiatives next year. There's a lot of other things we're doing. This is the big 3. There's probably 100 other initiatives I can name that are, not necessarily smaller, but they're important to our customers and to our growth of our systems. So the agenda for today, we'll kick it off with our electric and gas with John Gresham, our Senior Vice President and Chief Engineering and Operations Officer. We'll then hand it over to Kurt Stafford, our Vice President of Engineering, to talk about our water and wastewater programs and projects. We'll take a break, or if you need one sooner, let us know. And then Jamie, our Chief Technology Officer, will talk about our fiber and a lot of neat stuff we're doing there. And then the finale, our closer today, is Mark Walker, Chief Financial Officer, talk about financials, and Celeste is looking forward to that part of the presentation. So, as always. So anyway, we love it. Anyway, that's the way we talk about how we fund all those programs and projects we're doing. So, as always, appreciate you all, appreciate your feedback, appreciate your direction, and look forward to a great presentation today. So with that being said, I'll let John take it from there.
Sure. Thank you, Gabe. We'll see if we can set Mr. Walker up for success here. Maybe. Good morning. As Gabe said, we're going to talk a bit about our plans moving forward with our utility systems, focused predominantly on fiscal year '25, but sprinkling in some of the larger initiatives out into fiscal year '30. So we're going to move pretty fast to respect everybody's time. So if you have a question, just raise your hand and be happy to try to address that. So see if we can get started here. So you've seen this before. Let's kind of calibrate what we're talking about today. That's our electric service territory. And for us to serve those 218,000 customers, that's a large number for me from when I came here. Across 700 square miles, it takes a lot of assets to do that. So lots of wire, lots of substations, lots of switches, lots of things we have to take care of. And those assets need maintenance and they need replacement. And that's the basis of our Century 2 program. So we're going to be talking about that a little bit, those assets. So to put things in perspective for you from a financial perspective, you see highlighted here the electric divisional spend for both capital and O&M. You see what's up for fiscal year '25 there. You can see those dollars. You can see what's in the remainder of the plan there in that middle column, and then the total spend, just to give you an idea of what we're talking about. Another way of looking at this, and what we're going to do today, is really talk about predominantly the capital spend in electric and the program. So you can see $62 million for these programs we're going to talk about today into next year, and about $385 across the plan, broken out by these key assets. This is what we're going to talk about: our substations, our transmission system, distribution, and then some modernization, as Gabe referenced there. And you can see the breakouts for those spends. So pretty balanced approach to what we're investing in. So let's get started with our substations. So as you all likely know, we've been refurbishing our substations for a number of years now, and I'm happy to report we've made great progress. We're about 80+% done with refurbishing those substations. You can see in the map there all of the substations we have completed. That's a good approach. So spinning forward a bit into fiscal year '25, we do have plans to refurbish our Dolltown substation. You heard Gabe talking about West Hills a little bit and how it connects to the Western Avenue station. So West Hills is one of our large infeeds, and we plan to start refurbishing it in fiscal year '25, but that's a large project, and part of it will trickle over into fiscal year '26. And we're only able to do that because of the Western Avenue substation. So matter of fact, that station's out of service right now, so TVA can do some work on their side. So a lot of benefit there. And then we're also going to be adding some capacity to our Ball Camp substation there next year to address some growth and system needs in that area. So good work there. So looking forward to what's left to go is you see a couple of green stations here. So this is going to be the 2 new stations we build in this plan. So raised gaps down here in the southern part of our territory. And then we've got a Halls up in the Halls community, another substation planned to address growth in those 2 areas, as well as these red dots that are where locations that we're going to continue to increase capacity to continue to grow the system. So a lot of work going on related to our substations. I will say this refurbishment program is really we're starting to see the goal line. So in fiscal year '33, we will actually wrap up our refurbishment of all of our substations, which means we're going to turn our attention to a new asset and program that we're creating inside of this plan, and that's the remaining asset in our substations that we really haven't touched yet, and that's the large power transformers. We've got about 173 of these across our system, and as a reminder, they're big and bulky. They are quite costly, and they're one of those assets that we've had issues with in the supply chain. So there's like a 3 to 4 year lead time to even get one of these devices. So looking at the chart here, this represents the decades of installation for all of the devices in our system. And while this looks like a bit of an echo curve of put in and replace, that's really not what it's representing. It's really representing growth in the 50s and 60s and 70s, a slowdown in the 80s, moving into the 90s due to inflation back then, and then a picking up of business again moving into to date. So these devices they serve us anywhere from 30 to 60 to almost 80 years, right? We do have 2 transformers in our system that were put in the 1940s, and they're still serving us well. But it is time to pay attention to those. So historically, we've been what you might call a little reactive. We would buy a spare unit, keep that spare unit in the warehouse, and wait for the issue to happen. We'd go swap out the devices and move forward, and that served us very well for years. We experienced about 1 failure on average per year for years. The past couple of years, we've experienced a few more, and that was the genesis of this program. So what we're going to do is we are going to buy an additional unit beginning in fiscal year 26. That'll make 2 total for the year, and then years past that, we're going to increase that to 3 effectively, 1 spare and 2 replacement units, and then we're going to methodically start analyzing our fleet and replacing the appropriate transformers to pick up the pace. So this is going to be a really good program. It's going to be really proactive, and we're not only going to replace based on age, we're going to replace on other data we have. So we have a lot of conditional data on these units. We know where they're at in their life cycle for all practical purposes, so we'll start replacing that. And the outcomes of that are going to be really improve reliability and really reassure our system's resiliency. So those backup feeds will be stronger because those devices are there and we can shift load around. And then a side benefit of this is we're going to increase some system capacity as well. Our new standard transformers are larger than some of our historical legacy units, so we'll by default get some capacity increases. So any questions on our substations?
Are you able to recycle any parts of the units that go out of service?
And that you replace?
Yeah, that's a wonderful question, and we actually are. There are units that we will take out of service, and we will send them off to actually be refurbished. So we'll have a contractor that will take those units apart, refurbish all the internal windings. I mean, a transformer is ultimately a big block of metal wound with copper filled with oil. So not a lot of moving parts. But yeah, we do take units periodically. We've done that historically. That's sort of how we retain, a handful of spares. And yeah, that's a great question. And with the supply chain issues and with the cost issues we've been facing, that's a great strategy to do that. So yeah, we do that. Okay. Okay, so turning our attention to our transmission system, this is the backbone of how we move power around our system, and is very important to us. And again, you all know that we've been undergoing a rebuild initiative for quite some time. Again, we've made great progress. You can see on the map there, we're about 68% done with refurbishing these lines. And I'll remind you, when we refurbish, we replace poles, we replace fittings, we replace wire, and we're also adding fiber optic cable. So this is a high-speed connections to our substations, which are important for us moving into the future. So we're continuing on this project. So in fiscal year 25, what you see in yellow there is what we're going to be doing. It's about 10 miles of line being rebuilt in those 4 areas, 4 communities you see there. I think if I remember correctly, when we're done with this, we'll be about 75% complete with this program. We do project we'll be done in 31 or 32, working around our system here. We do plan to add an additional crew in fiscal year 27 to make sure we keep pace. And there's about, everything in red there is what we've got left, about 75 miles of cable to be done. So that program's going really well and providing good benefits. So any question on our sub-transmission system? All righty. So let's turn our attention to distribution. We've got a couple things going on here. We've got about a little over 5,000 miles of distribution out there. About 4,000 of it's our traditional overhead construction with the poles and the wires that you're used to seeing. And about 1,100 miles of that's underground cable, and we're going to talk about both of those, right? So for the overhead system, 2 programs to call out here worth noting today is one is our pole replacement process. And you can see on the chart there to your right how and this was deliberate, we deliberately slowed down our pace moving into the COVID period, and then learning about supply chain issues and then cost increase. We slowed down a little bit. One of the benefits of having these long-term Century 2 programs is we do have the ability to ebb and flow speed up and slow down as conditions warrant, right? And this is a great example of that. Here we are in fiscal year '24. This is what we've done to date. That's what we're going to finish by the end of the fiscal year. That's about 1,400 poles. And we need to reestablish up to about 2,000 poles per year. So over the next few years, we're going to ramp up by adding 4 crews over a few years there to get that pace of work back up. And we think that's a very sustainable, reasonable pace for our system and what we're trying to accomplish. In addition to that, just wanted to make sure we still invest in this distribution system by doing 13 kV line projects driven by growth, driven by reliability needs, driven by our FLISR program we'll talk about in a minute. As we put those units out there and we're looking for back feeds, we upsize lines to make sure the system can handle that. And so that's just 4 examples of a long list of projects we're doing this year. We invest about $8.5 million a year in that distribution system to make sure that we're able to serve our customers appropriately. Okay. That is, yeah, that's great. That's the voltage level. That's 13,000 volts. So
Those are like more powerful than the ones that we have above the replacement process, or?
no, our distribution system runs at 13,000 volts. The K is just a denotion of that. Our transmission system works at 69,000 volts, so you'll see 69 kV. And then TVA provides us power at 161,000 volts. So you kind of step it down as you get closer to the customer. So that's all that designates is the voltage level of that system. Good question. Mr. Williams is over there wanting me to talk about that in detail? No? No. Okay, so I will talk about that all day long, Gabe and I guess. Transitioning away from our overhead system is our underground system, and you all have heard a lot about this over the years. So we do have about 1,100 miles of cable in the ground, and we have a portion of that is direct buried, and we don't like that. So the program you've heard about is the top one. This is our XLP program that we've been speaking with you about for years. I'm happy to announce that this fiscal year we will remove the last bit of that cable from our system and we'll complete that program. That's what's shown on this chart. So 20 years of working cable out, about 175 miles. That bad actor cable will be gone here shortly. Now, that doesn't mean we're through. So now we're ramping up the next phase of that, and that's what's shown on this chart here. That's the new type of cable that we use here, which is the EPR version. We still put that cable top in today. But we have about 125 miles of that direct buried, which we don't like. So everything we install now is installed in conduit, which helps extend the life cycle of that cable. And it also makes it much easier to replace when the cable fails. So we're going to initiate that program. We're going to start with about 5 miles of that moving into 26, and then we're going to ramp up to 10 miles beginning in fiscal year 27, and we hope to work that cable out about that year right there. And when that occurs, there'll be another chart that shows us ramp back up, and we'll build our true Century 2 program, which will begin to address the actual 1,100 miles of cable by its life cycle. But again, it'll be in conduit, be much more effective to do that. So a lot of progress has been made there, and we're glad to have that bad type of cable out. And lastly, what you see there is a new, what I might term as a pilot project. We're going to do some exploration here in what we call a strategic underground conversion program. And what that's effectively going to do is we're going to try to do 1 to 2 miles per year, looking at areas of low reliability, bad reliability, which is typically heavily vegetated areas and or backlot line construction. So there was a phase in time where a new subdivision would be built, if you're familiar with the Powell area, there's a large subdivision there called Broadacres, which has experienced some issues over the past couple of years. When that subdivision was built, our assets were put in the backyards, not out on the roads like you're used to. Well, that was a great idea at the time, but the community's put up fences, they've built storage houses, they've planted trees. Access is extremely difficult when things happen there. So we're gonna explore what that might look like in taking existing overhead construction, moving it underground, and improving reliability. So a great program that I'm real excited about, and we'll start doing that in '26 to see how that goes. So any questions on our distribution investments?
Why did we ever, do direct carry? Like,
It was just the industry standard at the time, and the vendor said that's the way to do it, and there's no problems with that. And, 30, 40 years later, you find out that the rubber that those things are built with started having problems, and they actually changed to this new type of cable, which is more of a solid internal thing. So it probably does a little better direct buried, but honestly, not having to dig to replace it's really a good thing that we learned over the years. But I would say the vendors kind of said, just bury it and you're good. We didn't know what we didn't know at the time.
Yeah, and I'll add to that. That was just open. This is the early in the '70s. That was the first time underground power ever existed. Prior to that, there was no such thing. And so, vendors were all learning, and we just opened ditches and threw the wire in the ground and went on. And then it started filling at a pretty exponential rate, especially in the '90s. We started seeing a lot of failures, and it was like, oh, this is not good. And we changed our policy in '94 to have required conduit. We were one of the first utilities in the country to do that, actually. But we had to get rid of this old stuff first. So it's been an evolution of 30 years of getting it replaced and in conduit. So we don't have to dig anymore at some point.
We had it to do over. which
Yeah, we
we
had to
are.
do over. Yeah.
It's getting us there very rapidly, but great question. So, turning to what Gabe was talking about, the changes that are occurring in the electric industry across the nation, are being impactful to us. We call that grid modernization here. Really, it's about leveraging this high-speed communication system that we're building out, fiber. So as great as all the stuff Jamie's about to talk to you about in lighting up our customers, I care more about leveraging fiber to operate our systems to serve those same customers. So don't listen to everything he has to say. So to do that, we've got a few things going on, right? You've heard about our FLISR deployment, right? Do I need to say the acronym? We've run out of 3-letter acronyms, so we're making up 5-letter acronyms now. So fault location, isolation, and service restoration. And this is the basis of a self-healing grid. So we're going to put 1,200 of these switches, smart switches, out in our system that work independently and automatically. And they prevent customer minutes of interruption. So that project's going really, really well. We're in the 3rd year, moving to the 4th year of deployment, following right behind Jamie's crews as they put fiber in the air. And what you see here on the chart, this blue line, is the units we've installed. So we're about to cross the 250 unit mark. We're real happy about that. What we're more happy about is these orange bars represent the customer minutes of interruptions that have been prevented with these devices. And if you totalize these lines, and this bar looks short because that's January to April, it's calendar year based, so it's going to go up. That's about 26 million minutes of interruption that our customers have not experienced. And that's just with this number of units. So as we continue to grow this system, that's only going to get better. So it's going really well. We plan for 144 more units next fiscal year, at just under $10 million. The rest of the plan has about 720 units in it, and that will bring us very close to our 1,200 unit deployment, and we'll be good to go.
John, do we know what the approximate life cycle is of those units?
Yeah, that's a great question. The physical unit itself is not too drastically different than traditional reclosers we'd used before, and they last a very long time. That's a 30-year device minimum. Now, the batteries and the electronics on those, probably a little shorter life cycle, but they're very modular. So the way these devices work, it's just like plugging in a battery and plugging in a unit, and you've replaced that whole deal. And then they connect up to fiber, and that age is going to be, very long-standing there. So I think we're going to get a lot of life out of these. Moving forward a bit, 2 new programs we're going to introduce in this plan. Both of them kind of on the back end of the plan a little bit, but one of those initiatives is called voltage optimization. And to not get into too much of the details here, this was an after action from the Tennessee Valley Authority. So we came through Winter Storm Elliott, right? And we had the mandated outages during that event, which were related to system capacity on their part. So what they are doing is encouraging voltage optimization, because power is the result of voltage times current. And so we are regulated to be in a very narrow band of voltage to operate our system, but the lower we can keep it on that voltage spectrum, the less power is required to serve our customer, if that makes sense. So there's a direct correlation between voltage and power. And that's what this system is going to be intended to do, is to allow us, at least in times of high consumption, when temperatures are really cold or really hot, manage our peak. So you're really trying to clip the peak in those times. So Winter Storm Elliott, from 7 in the morning to 9 in the morning, consumption really goes up. So we'll want to clip that peak by lowering that voltage across our system. So we're going to start exploring this technology and putting it in play and just see if it's effective for us and try to help TVA and help our customers along those lines in managing the peaks. The second one you've probably heard more about, and that's the concept of using batteries at the utility scale. And while that's pretty new technology, we feel it coming. So we do have plans to put about 20 megawatts of storage on our system out at the tail end of this plan. Again, it's about managing system peaks. So using that same analogy, the next Winter Storm Elliott comes along, temperatures really drop. They drop for a couple of hours, or the consumption peaks for a couple of hours. We'll basically coast on these batteries. We'll engage the batteries. They will have been charged up and stored with energy TVA produced when it wasn't so busy. It holds it, we'll engage them, and we'll ride through those peaks. So we're real interested in looking at how this technology works, and excited to get that out there on our system to make sure we're able to serve our customers. So a lot going on in this space. There's many more things we're talking about that we're not ready to quite introduce yet, but those are the three that are making a difference for us, or will make a difference for us. Staying on the technological theme here, we do continue to invest in technologies to make these things work. So one I wanted to call out was an IT system almost around here as long as I've been around here, and it's our supervisory control and data acquisition system. So when you went through the operational tour in our operational center on the electric side, this is what everybody was staring at on their screens. And this is our system that gives us a lot of tactical feedback data from our system that allows us to operate the system. It also gives us that remote control capability to open and close things, including our Flosser units if we so choose. So this unit's been around a long time. It has been patched a couple of times, but it was not built for these new technologies. So this project's actually underway as we speak. We're going to invest about $1.8 million over the next 18 months to get that ready to go. The key takeaways there for us are realistically, these new devices out in the field require communication protocols. So we're modernizing our ability to talk to devices. Obviously going to get a whole lot more data and give us analytical capabilities that we've never had before. Cybersecurity is important, so this system's got a much stronger patching capability to address security. And then it's also going to give us some really enhanced tools for those Flosser units. So historically, our SCADA and our automation has been contained within the substation fence. So very localized, very concentrated. Flosser jumped across the fence and is all over our territory. So we just need more tools to be able to see the status of those devices and operate them. So this is going to be a great project for us, and we're excited to do it. This product also supports our natural gas system and a little bit of our wastewater activities as well. So it does do more than just electric. I would be remiss, as always, if I didn't bring up our vegetation management program. It's critical to our reliability for our customers. You see there at the bottom, about 60% on average of our customer interruption related to vegetation. So it's a big deal for us. We have the programs you see there. I won't belabor the point. The big change in this plan through the inflation response is we're going to add about $500,000 a year to our sub-transmission program. And that's going to allow us to move that from a 4-year program cycle to a 3-year cycle, which is much more like the industry standard. And again, that's our critical backbone to move energy around the system. So we're staying hard at our vegetation management program. So, that being said, that covers our electric system. And as Gabe said, we really wanted to bring to you some value here. So Century 2 outcomes for the electric system is really about service reliability. And if you look at the chart here, another five-letter acronym. I didn't realize we had so many of these, but a board metric that y'all have seen before. So, right, that's a system average interruption duration index, which ultimately is we take all of our customer minutes of interruption during a year, divide it by the total number of customers, and now you've got the average duration of an outage. In 2007, that set at about 2.75 hours per customer per year. You can see we've methodically driven this down to last year we achieved 1.85, and that's about a 33% increase. Now, there's a lot of variability here because that's driven by weather, driven by tree growing periods, it's driven by a lot of stuff, but you can see the trend driving here. I've highlighted this number at 1 hour per customer per year because that's where we think we're heading with the Flicer unit. So again, our Flicer system's already prevented 26 million minutes of interruption. And we think that's a good note. We think that's very prevalent to our customers. As Gabe referenced, even with the storm, the hardening things we're doing, you're just seeing a different impact as we move through our system. So that concludes our electric story. Any questions, commentary?
Just one other question on the battery storage. So being able to do that and pull those into play to help keep us under our peak, I'm assuming that not only takes stress off the system, but it would also incur some savings for us by not having to pay for those peak hours, correct?
Yeah, potentially. There's a number of use cases that are out there. One of those is using it for demand management, which could have a fiscal return for us, yes.
Okay.
Now, it would probably take us building out more than we plan at the moment, but I think that's one of the things we're going to explore is we may use that daily/monthly to really drive down some costs. Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, that's a great observation.
As you look at the inputs for, the transformers and all of that, how much of that do you think is comprised of steel? I mean, is steel a big part of what all of that is composed of?
Yeah,
Okay.
steel and copper are the two materials prominent, yeah.
Yeah, steel is an input that I look at every day. And I mean, yesterday Biden announced tariffs on steel from China. I think either administration is going to put tariffs on steel. You've got the pending Nippon Steel, Cleveland Cliffs, U.S. Steel fight over who's going to own who. So I just think that's probably a risk to be aware of, is that the cost of steel is likely to be impacted by trade policy in a way that will not be favorable for all of us.
Yeah.
So in the transformer business, it's steel, copper, oil.
Yep.
And all those have gone up, and oil's probably stabilized and might come down a little bit, but all those are part of a transformer, yes. So we're filling in those transformers. I'm sure our suppliers are filling it, therefore passing it on to us. But yes, it's real.
Our trade policy seems to ignore the fact that when you raise the cost of those inputs, everybody who consumes anything that has that as an input is impacted. And ultimately, people at the end of the day, consumers. But somehow that's not getting into the minds of politicians, because it just, in my opinion, sounds good to say we're going to impose tariffs.
I would say that's changing a little bit. The example I would use, not to belabor the point here, but the EPA had a mandate on distribution level transformers over the past few years, and they were changing the energy efficiency requirements for those devices, which required a new type of steel to be utilized, and there was one factory in the United States that made that type of steel. And so the utility industry came together, lobbied Congress, and I think recently we got positive news that they're going to push that out a bit. So I think some of the realization of what you're talking about is beginning to sink in, and I would say even our transmission poles are made of steel. And our vendor has approached us recently with what we consider to be an unacceptable price increase. And so we've gone back out to market to bid, and luckily got some more favorable pricing by looking at some other vendors. But you're spot on, and unfortunately for us, it's just moving month to month. So it was wooden poles a few months ago. It's steel now. It's fittings for our 69 kV poles. We're having trouble finding those. So it's just it's an ongoing labor of love to try to figure out how we can afford and how we can find the stuff we need to do business. But
Yeah, as
steel
an
in
industry,
particular.
we're very active in educating people, so just made me think connecting with the electric industry advocacy groups might be good to make sure people in DC are educated about this.
Yep, fair point. Okay. With that, I'm gonna, one other thing, I almost forgot. I do have some good news here, as Gabe mentioned. We did recently receive news last week that the American Public Power Association has yet again awarded us their Reliable Public Power Provider designation, RP3. We achieved this at the diamond level, which is the highest level that can be achieved. This is our third consecutive perfect score, so we apply every 3 years, so it's 9 years of perfect scoring. To put that in perspective, there's 2,000 public utilities in the United States, 112 of them attain this level of designation and certification. So not to say we're in rarefied air, but we're in rare company there, and we're real proud of that. So that's talking about best practices in system reliability, safety, workplace development, system improvement. So you see a picture, here's the slide, here's the plaque. Real happy about that. So kudos to everybody that, applies for this thing. It's a very extensive, laborious application process. A lot of folks around KUB have to rally around that, but we've achieved it once again. And again, we think that's an indicator of doing the right things as we had. So a bit of good news there as we transition now to our gas system. So again, you've seen this, same story, 110,000 customers, lots of assets, lots of pipe, lots of stations, lots of things that have to be maintained, operated, and replaced. Divisional spend here, again highlighted. You see the capital, you see the O&M for next year, the plan, and in total. To talk about the capital things we're about to talk about, here's the pie chart, $24 million next year in capital expenditure on these things, 145 in the plan. We will be talking about our high pressure system, which is this slice here. We're, again, pretty balanced in what we do. Growth is a big impact to the gas system. And then we've got a neat initiative we're going to talk about here in a minute related to our meters that we'll be talking about. So starting with our high pressure system, and again, I needed to clarify this. Our Century 2 program for the gas system is really driven by regulatory requirements, right? So we've spoken to you in the past about our Distribution Integrity Management Program, our DIMP program. DIMP program requires us to know our system, to evaluate our system, to identify our risks and or priorities, and then to build plans to address those. So that's really what drives these investments here. So at the high pressure system, which again, we have about 70 some odd miles across our system, predominantly steel. It is the backbone of how we move bulk gas around our system and feed our distribution system. So it's pretty important to us. It's what's in red here. We do have three projects of note to mention. The East Bridge Loop here that we're extending out in East Knox County and going to connect to existing pipe here to create a loop to serve the East Bridge Industrial Park as well as the East Bridge community in general with reliable gas. So that project's underway. This solid green line is being constructed as we speak. That's about $2 million in this fiscal year. Another $5 million in 25, and ultimately is going to culminate 9.5 miles of 12-inch pipe out into that community. So really building opportunity for new service growth, building opportunity for resilient supply for our customers, and that one's underway. The next project, if anybody's driven out to the airport in the last 100 years, you know what's been going on out there. So TDOT's ramped up their next phase of this, and that work is requiring us to get out of their way. So we got to move some high pressure steel out of their way. This project really doesn't have a huge fiscal impact to us. It's reimbursable, but it does do, we've been working for a while, and we'll talk about it in a minute, but we've been trying to eliminate legacy pipe, which was ultimately cast iron and ductile iron from our system for years. This project will complete that. The last small bit of ductile iron, we've been waiting for them to do this to get that out of our system, so it's worth noting that'll be solid. And then lastly, what we call the Knox lateral, which is this segment here from downtown West Boulevard, crossing the interstate back towards Middlebrook Pike. This is a project we've been waiting on for quite a long time. It's important to us. It's in the back end of this plan, but it's on our radar now. So it's a $29 million initiative to replace just under 5 miles of 1950s vintage pipe. And while we're excited about this, is we're going to upgrade it from a 12-inch pipe to a 16-inch pipe and really remove a process constraint in our system. So once this happens, it's going to really open up some operational flexibility for us. So it's a big initiative, going to be a big project, and we're looking forward to it. So that's the work on our high-pressure system. In our distribution system, a couple of programs here of note to mention. The first one is what we call our coupled steel program. And what coupled steel is mechanically jointed pipe. So our plastic system's welded, solid, tight. Mechanical fittings can be problematic. We've identified that. So we've been working on this program, I think, since about 2014, eliminating that steel pipe in our system. Next year, we're just continuing that program. So we've done like 100 plus miles of this has been done to date. You see the mileage there. The areas they're designated in blue. So Broad Acres, we talked about that, the backlot line power. Well, they've got gas things we're working on. That project is active now and will complete next year. Village Green's another area. The Sherwood here, another area where we're focusing on eliminating those pipe types from our system. In addition to that, the other program that we've been working on since about 2016 is what we call looping projects. And this is our endeavor to eliminate single points of failure or single feeds into large areas. So we're really targeting customer groups of about 200 or less. So we don't want to have a single point of failure that could impact 200 customers. And we've been at that for quite a while. And these green areas are where we'll be working next. And we've made some progress there we'll talk about, but about $1.5 million a year to fund that program. And really we do that because gas outages are a little different than say our electric outages. Electric outages, we can have thousands of those related to one thing and we fix it pretty quick. Gas outages, what you have to do to respond to a gas outage is you have to go visit every meter, turn it off, go effect the repair to the main, get gas pressurized and restored, and then visit the meters again, which typically requires you to interact with the customer to light pilots. So an outage of 100 gas customers is logistically difficult. So we really want to lower that down. We also invest in our gate and pressure regulating stations and doing that again in fiscal year 25. So at our topside road station, which is one you visited when you went on your commissioner tour, we're uprating the metering capability at that station, which is ultimately going to allow us to push more gas through that station to our system when we need to, which gives us some operational flexibility. We do invest in our pressure regulator stations on a regular basis, so 3 up for next year. And that's really about getting them connected to SCADA, refurbishing them, making sure they do the things we need them to do. And then lastly, putting in that East Bridge loop is going to require 2 new pressure regulator stations on each end. I think if I can go back. So you'll have a new station here and a new station here so that we can operate this segment of pipe correctly. So that's our investments for that. And then some real exciting news here. If you remember back in the mid-2000s when we did the meter change out, I guess our first modernization program, Jamie, if I'm correct, we replaced all the meters in all of our systems over a 4-year period, a big endeavor there. Well, as we did that, this is our legacy meters here. This is a new type of meter that's coming. When we did that, we upgraded the regulation capability of these meters, but we really didn't change the internals of the meter at the time. Well, technology's now caught up with us. Price points have come to a good place. So we have a plan over 8 to 9 years to replace about 100,000 residential meters across our system at a cost of about $112 million, of which about $54 million of that's in the current plan we're talking about today. So this new metering type offers us some pretty good value here, and it's a safety thing. They're smart. and they're sensitive enough to sense a leak on the customer side, and they'll shut themselves off and notify us that that's been shut off. That's a big deal for us. It's also going to give us the capability to remotely shut off those meters if we need to. So that's a big deal for us. Obviously, again, new technology, more data. So we're going to be able to get pressure and temperature data off of these devices and incorporate those into our operational systems to make us better. And then honestly, aesthetically, that probably looks a little better than that. It takes up less space, looks more modern, and a good deal. So we're real excited about this. I do think this program gives us some flexibility. I know it's a bit out there and it's a bit long-term, but if we need to speed up, we need to slow down, I think we've got some flexibility as we do this. Of course, it will require us to interact with our customers and do all the planning we had to do before, but it's a big deal and going to be a big step forward for us technologically. So gas growth, gas's growth is important to that system. You can see this chart you've seen before. It's continuing. I think we're projecting to add maybe 2,000 new gas customers next year. So gas is really busy. Growth is busy in that area. You can kind of see the areas here. We've got about $45 million for extensions, new subdivisions. Some other meter additions. Those 2,000 meters have to be bought regardless of type. But you can see the areas of growth. We talked about East Bridge already. Everybody knows what's going on in Hardin Valley. They're building every square inch of property you can find down there. A lot of business in Solway. And then a really neat development here is the Belltown development. I don't know if you're familiar with the Belltown space being built and a lot of recreational space. So for the gas system, our backbone infrastructure was right at their front door. We were ready. Really convenient for us. But we still put in 5 miles of pipe to serve the development, if that puts it in perspective. It's a big deal for the community. So growth's important, and that's staying consistent for us. So to wrap up gas, trying to get those outcomes for you here, it's really about that pipe replacement and that reduction of those metal pipes in our distribution system. We're about 50% complete. So 137 miles, there you go, I was looking for that number. 137 miles have been replaced since 2007. You can see the cast iron and the ductile iron here. It's going away. That little red sliver there is Alcoa Highway, and we're done. And then we're also driving down the rest of the steel here, so we feel real good about that for our customers. And then we talked about the eliminating one-way feeds, so we put in over 11 miles of pipe to create those back feeds, and we've really helped 12,000 customers not experience issues when there's gas system things going on.
So John, with the growth in the gas system, how quickly are you going to be able to start installing those newer meters so that you're not just having to replace something down the road that you've just installed?
Yeah, that's a great question.
Years before.
So Jamie may know more about this than I do. We've already got some in.
Yeah, we've been piloting that for a while, and then, yeah, I forgot my mic. We've been piloting that for a while, and so it's a balance between the speed in which we get those out and our existing stock. So we'll just strike that balance. I think the biggest bulk of the replacement comes in FY27. So I would think we'd probably set a goal within the next couple of years. That's our standard. But it's really just kind of a phase in, a ramp. We did the very same thing with the first generation of AMI meters. Was you don't want to put that in theory back then. It was no electromechanical to go right back out with it. So it'll be a pretty quick adoption once things get rolling. We want to be sure supply chain stabilized. We've got all the IT integrations built, but I think it'll be a pretty easy transition.
Yep. Thank you, Jamie.
So I know in some states there's been some legislative effort to either outlaw natural gas or curtail it. You know, Illinois I know is a problem. I presume we don't have any issues in Tennessee. Do you see anything at the federal level ever coming where?
I do not, and I'll speak to that. I do not. Actually, some cities that have banned it have reversed their bannings because lots of reasons. They need capacity for growth. They need, in some cases, chefs and restaurant owners to a fit because that's how they want to cook, and so it's very much. I don't think it's going to happen in the state ever. But at the same time, we do keep an eye on that at all times to make sure. I mean, we're continuing to see growth. People still want it. It is a choice. If utility, if you can call it that, people choose. They don't have to have it. They can have electric only. But most of our folks still really want it for that comfort in the winter and that cooking ability and stuff. So to answer your question, I just don't see that happening, but we'll constantly monitor it.
Yeah,
We have state law in Tennessee.
now I would say Probably, and John, correct me if I'm wrong, you went to the meeting, but I would say the biggest threat right now to that is a little backhanded, and it's the government regulating the appliances and restricting the emissions for a gas stove or a gas water heater, and effectively make them not viable solutions would be one way to do that. And I think people are talking about that now in the industry.
Yeah, that's the unfortunate part of how it's going right now is states like Tennessee, there's about 25, 28 states that have put in that, what they kind of call fuel choice regulations in place to allow the customer to choose which fuel they want to use. But what's happening is behind the scenes, they're putting in regulations that are putting the natural gas industry in a really difficult position because they're mandating emissions reductions when there's no emissions really there to reduce. So in effect, by putting the same standard that they're putting on it, they're in effect stopping it from happening. The best way of saying it is like right now, if you look at a refrigerator, the appliance standards, there's a different standard for an ice maker as for the entire refrigerator. So how it goes about that is what they're trying to do is say that all furnaces, for example, electric, gas, fall under the same standard. And so they're putting them all together as opposed to realizing that, no, they work differently, they operate differently, they have different fuel source, and so they're trying to do that. So the natural gas industry is trying to separate those out. They're trying to work through those, but they're at a bit of a disadvantage right now because the way that they're going about it seems as if there's an attempt to backdoor these regulations to take these appliances off the shelf so that customers can't buy them. And that's happening at the furnace level. It's attempted at the stove level. And it started first with kind of commercial stuff, and it's beginning to kind of get down to the residential level. So the industry's working hard to try to prevent that from happening. A lot of work there, but it's an uphill battle at the moment.
All right, thanks, John. So similar to, and good morning, Commissioners. So similar to what we saw with the gas and electric, we'll talk about the water and wastewater, and we'll talk about FY25, which obviously is next year, and then go all the way through FY30. But similar to what the discussion we had before, if you have any questions as we kind of go through this, feel free to speak up, and we'll do our best to answer those questions. So kind of want to orientate everybody to the water system. The map on the right, this is our water system. The outline of our service territory is in red right there. City of Knoxville is the shaded area kind of in the center. And you can see also in our service territory off to the east side of the city of Knoxville, we have a large portion of East Knox County kind of south of the Holston River right there. We have about 82,000 customers. We maintain, obviously, our water treatment plant down off Riverside Drive that probably a lot of you have visited. We have 27 pump stations, 28 storage facilities that we use to maintain the water pumped out in the system. So kind of similar to what we saw a little bit earlier, just kind of transition to the water, we'll look at the overall spend on capital and O&M. So overall on the division side, capital spend for fiscal years 25 through 30 is about $251 million. On the O&M side is about something similar. It's about $260 million. So kind of as we go through this a little bit more, we'll talk a bit more about our capital programs, kind of like we saw with gas and electric. So this is a pie chart that kind of breaks down, for the next 6 years, our capital spend. All these are Century 2 programs that comprise this. You can see the pie chart on the right. You can see that our treatment plant work is really a significant part of the upcoming plan. We're spending about $94 million there. That's almost half of the spend that we have coming up over the next couple of years. We'll be spending $52 million in fiscal year 25, and then $171 million throughout the remainder of that through fiscal years 30. The water supply master plan is really what's driving that treatment plant work that we're doing, and we'll talk a bit more about that later. But also we want to replace some of the older pipe that we have out in the system. So we have a focus on replacing cast iron and concrete pipe. We're also going to be finishing up our galvanized replacement, which we'll talk a little bit more about that as we move forward. But that's really the two emphasis points are treatment work and then also replacing older type of pipe. So first I want to kick it off kind of talking about our treatment plant work, and we've talked a little bit before about this, and Gabe alluded to our filters project that we have that's ongoing. We plan to spend about $94 million across those 6 years on treatment plant work. The filters project is ongoing right now. That's that top picture on the right. It's really neat. If you haven't got a chance to go out there recently, feel free to just contact us. We'll schedule some kind of tour. We'll get out there and take a look at that. It's really neat. There's a lot of stuff coming up out of the ground now. It's really cool project. That'll be complete next summer, so that'll be complete in fiscal year 25. One of the neat things that on that project that we did is we were able to obtain about $25 million in ARPA funding. So we're using that towards the cost of that project, which has really been very beneficial. We talked about our water supply master plan. And really what that is that's helping build redundancy and resiliency of the plant. So there's no single point of failure, kind of have a dual train there to where if something happened, we'd have redundancy. And so that's a really big initiative that we've been working on. We've been working on it for a couple of years. Some of the couple of projects that we have coming up with under the water supply master plan, starting in FY26, we'll be doing some electrical upgrades at the plant. And that will really help support, like you see the filters project, will help support the electrical for those new buildings and also kind of upgrade and modernize some of the electrical things that we have at the plant. We're also doing a low service pump station and a new intake out in the river. And we'll also be building a distribution box up near the new clarifiers to make those connections as we build a new clarifier kind of outside of the bounds of that FY30. Some of the other MBW projects that we have going on, they're more asset renewal type of work. But we have clarifier equipment replacement in FY26 and 27, and then we're resurfacing the sedimentation basin in FY28. And those kind of pave the way for some of the water supply master plan work, so that's sort of helping with kind of push that forward. Any questions on the treatment plant? Okay. So I want to talk a little bit about our distribution system. So that's all the pipes that we have. So obviously, treatment plant work, we're producing water, pushing it out in the system. Our distribution system is what's maintaining that, getting that out to our customers. So, our distribution system projects that we have, they're really focused on replacing distribution mains and transmission mains out in the system and looking at replacing that older type of pipe that we talked about. So if you look at that pie chart off the right there, about 66% of our distribution system is a newer type pipes, and that's plastic and ductile iron type pipes, and that's really what we want out there. About 34% of the system is cast iron and galvanized and cement pipe, and that's really what we're targeting with some of these projects that we're doing out in the system. Across those next 6 years, you can see in the bottom right there, that's the graph that shows what we're going to be replacing the mileage. We're planning to replace about 67 miles of pipe across the plan. One of the things we want to highlight there is we're spending about $7 million to replace galvanized pipe, and we'll actually have that all removed by fiscal year 27. We have only 6 miles remaining of that, and you can see in the chart down at the bottom right, the blue, we have orange is the cast iron and concrete, but the blue right there is galvanized pipe, and you can see we're pulling out about 2 miles per year of galvanized pipe, and we'll have that removed. And we'll talk a little bit more about galvanized pipe and some of the improvements that have come from getting that out of the system. The big focus now as we transition out of the galvanized pipe, we're going to be working on more cast iron and cement, which is the other older type of pipe. That actually represents about 33% of our system right now. And so that'll help continue to drive down main breaks, and we'll talk about a little bit more about that momentarily. But we're spending about $67 million across the plan on those projects for that program. So I want to focus a little bit on galvanized and talk about where we've kind of been and where we're at now. I want to highlight over the past couple of years, KUB has done a really good job. We've built up 3 internal capital crews at KUB, and they're really focused on doing capital projects for us. So these are crews that we can hand projects off to, and they can do work for us, and that's really created a lot of internal expertise and also flexibility for us, because we don't necessarily have to bid it out. We can do things, and there's a quick turnaround, things like that. So that's been really beneficial. As I mentioned before, galvanized will be taken completely out of the system by FY27. But if you see this graph off to the right here, so the blue line looks at the amount of galvanized pipe we've had in the system over the past 20 years. So you can see back in 2004 when we started that, we had close to 140 miles, and we're getting it down to we've got about 10 miles right now. But one of the things we want to point out with this is that it's really had a that program being strategically targeting galvanized has really had a big impact on the number of water main breaks we've had across the system. So the orange bars right there represent the percentage of main breaks that are attributable to galvanized. So back in 2004, when we had 137 miles of galvanized pipe in the system, that was galvanized pipe breaks were attributed to about 61% of all main breaks in our system. So that was really a significant thing. So that's when we just started targeting, trying to get this pipe out of the system. So fast forward, 20 years, we've got 10 miles of pipe left, and those same kind of main breaks account for only 4% of all our main breaks. So we've really done a good job driving that down. Just want to highlight that right there. Also, kind of want to talk a little bit about some of our distribution projects. There's some neat ones coming up that we want to let you all know about. Something that will be going this summer on Cumberland Avenue right near UT between 16th Street and 11th Street. We're replacing about 1,800 feet of 16-inch cast iron that we have there. It's from the 1920s. And you'll recall a couple months ago, John talked about this, but we had a main break out there, I guess last summer. And you can see the picture on the bottom right there. That's the repair. That main break cost about $200,000 to fix, so it was really expensive. So we're targeting that to replace that this summer. There'll be some lane closures, but internal crews will be doing that work while UT's out for the summer. We talked a little bit about Boyd's Bridge. Gabe mentioned that was an initiative that we had. And we did the emergency repairs out there, but there's actually a second phase to that, which is where we go back out there and put the permanent fix in. And so in fiscal year 25, we'll be putting a new line out there across Boyd's Bridge. We'll probably end up boring the line under the river, but we're still filling out those details, and so that there'll be more to come on that. We'll talk a bit more about that as that project kind of progresses. You know, we have the water supply master plan, which sort of guides our treatment processes and projects we do there. We also have a distribution system master plan, so we've got some projects we wanted to highlight from that, and it really looks at as the system expands, more customers come online, demand increases, you know, what do we need to do out in the system to make sure that we're ready for that? So we got two projects right there. One of them is Forks of the River that will be in FY 26 and 27. And so right now we have a one-way feed going into Forks of the River Industrial Park. We want to add a second connection in there to be able to add redundancy and also future for growth. You know, if we get new customers out there, somebody needs a lot of water, that'll provide for a lot of demand and things like that out in that area. Also on the back side of the plant, right behind us, obviously the Tennessee River, we have a 16-inch cast iron line that runs under the bottom of the river all the way to the South Knoxville. We're going to replace that and upsize it with a 24-inch line in FY 28, and that'll help us make sure that we can supply water into South Knoxville, make sure that we can keep up with the demands and customer growth out there too. Also want to highlight system improvements. System improvements are something we'll be spending about $12 million over the course of from FY 25 to FY 30. And really what that is that's replacing fire hydrants, valves, and also paving to help, you know, pave over these projects and places that we're working at. It also includes some work for district metering and pressure management. You know, pressure management is where out in the system we target areas that might be a little bit higher pressure to make sure we limit the amount of main breaks, and also district metering helps us kind of see where we have water flowing through the system and where that's going, and just make sure we're able to track all the flow across the system. Any questions on distribution system projects? All right, so talk about remote sites on the water side. So remote sites typically on the water side consist of booster pump stations that we have in that system. Also storage tanks are another thing that we maintain. So we're planning to spend about $18 million over the course of the long range plan on remote site projects. Some of the ones we want to highlight is you know, anybody that's visited our Middlebrook Pike location recently, we're building a booster pump station just right outside that front gate right there. You can see a photograph of it where they're building the foundation for it. They've actually built it now. They've actually got the building almost closed in. But that's going to be finished in FY 25. And that's really critical to helping our Third Creek repump area. And so what that'll do is once we're able to get that online, then we'll be able to provide a critical kind of redundancy into our Third Creek repump area, and also move water into West Knox, which we haven't been able to necessarily do in the past. Once we get that online, it'll able to free up our Third Creek booster pump station. We'll be able to do some rehabilitative work there and make sure that was ready to go for the next 50 years or so. Buffett Mill Reservoir. So this is a project that looks at, you know, out in the system, we pump water out of the treatment plant. We have to have storage out in the system to make sure if there's a fire or things like that we have storage ready for that. So we've looked at it. We're looking at it all the way out to 2040. So we've realized that we need some additional storage at Buffett Mill Reservoir. So we're planning in fiscal year 30 and 31 to put some more storage out there, about 4 million gallons out there, to make sure that we've got enough storage out in the system in capacity. Similar to what John highlighted on some of this stuff, we want to make sure that we show some of the technological advances, some things we're doing for on the water system. So one of the newer initiatives we have is we have an in-house drone program, and we're actually going to be piloting that drone on the upcoming Cumberland Avenue project that we just talked about a little bit earlier. The good things about that, it'll help us create digital as-built, because as it flies over the project, it actually it'll map the surface, so they'll be able to figure out, you know, be able to create as-builts. Also, we'll take critical photos of tie-ins, so we'll be tying in a lot of big pipes there. We'll be able to take photographs of that.
And then also just for our communications, just other uses, we'll be able to take project videos. We'll be able to fly over crews and just kind of show what's going on out there and keep track of the progress of the construction. So we want to pilot that, and that may end up expanding out to other areas of KUB as there's a lot of needs for that kind of stuff. Motion amplification technology is another thing that we're working on, and this is really neat. This helps our maintenance crews. So really what this is it's camera technology. So they set this up near a pump or a motor. You know, obviously we've got a lot of pumps and motors that work at the treatment plant, different places out in the facility, out in the system, need to operate 24/7, right? They can't break down. So we set a camera up there. They actually take videos of the thing while it's operating, and it looks for abnormal motion and things like that. So this is used as an algorithm to be able to detect that kind of stuff. And that actually, those kind of motions and things like that can lead to premature failure of the pumps and motors. And so we've actually been using this recently. We identified a defective weld at the Third Creek booster pump station. We're able to fix that before the motor failed. So that's something that we're using that's kind of cutting edge, something that's kind of new. Similar to what we saw on gas and electric, want to just highlight some of the Century 2 outcomes and some of the good things that we've seen. So we talked about main breaks a few minutes ago, but just kind of want to highlight that, since 2008 when main breaks peaked, we've actually reduced main breaks 64% since fiscal year 28. Fiscal year 23 was actually the lowest record that we have on date, and that was preceded by 4 record-setting years. So we've done really good with pulling down the number of main breaks overall. And you can kind of see, if you look at the graph on the right, the red bars represent the galvanized main breaks, and you can see back when we first started talking about that, there was a lot of galvanized main breaks, but you can see those are almost gone now, which has really been the big impact to drive this down. The blue and the green bars right there are the cast iron and concrete that we talked about. So that's going to be our next focus, is driving those numbers down and keeping that moving lower and lower. So our goal is to have a 6th year now of record-setting lows on main breaks. I think the other thing we want to highlight is just some of the significant investments that we've made at MBW. We've obviously wanted to add a lot of redundancy and stuff for the treatment processes there, because that's critical, because we have one plant. So that's just a critical part of our Century 2 program. So any questions on water system?
The new PFAS regulations from the EPA, will that affect us at all?
John? Yeah.
You want to grab that?
You grab that one.
Yeah, we've been keeping a close eye on that. It has the potential to have an impact on us. We've done some recent monitoring in coordination with TDEC. Indications are we don't have an issue. We're currently under the new regulations that were just set by the EPA, but there's more monitoring to come the remainder of this calendar year, and we'll keep watching that. Again, we're engaged with the industry folks, organizations, keeping an eye on that and lobbying for what we need to do. But it's something worth watching. But as we sit here today, we are in compliance with those very low emission standards they've set. So I think you all saw an email from me and saw kind of, recently I think it's finding 1 drop in 4 or 5 Olympic pools. I mean, it's a crazy number, and even the technology for monitoring and measuring this isn't quite stabilized yet. But yeah, it'll be well worth watching. And what we're advocating for, within Congress is, let's make sure the polluter is held accountable, not just us. We're a passive receiver of this material, but in the end of the day, there's probably likely something we're going to have to do to make sure we're a part of the solution.
Do we have any major polluters here that we know of that cause?
I don't think locally, probably not. Upstream from us, say up where Kodak or Eastman may be. I think there's been some talk in the media where they may have some issues upstream from us. But again, that stuff will collect in the lakes and the dams, and all the things TVA does for us helps a bit. But locally, I don't think we have any polluters that I'm aware of that produce that chemical. So it's a great question, and a whole lot more to come as that continues to mature.
Yeah, there's been discussions around that for 4 or 5 years or more. I mean, that's been talked about for years, those regulations.
Yeah, and they're only looking at 6. I mean, there's
Right, and there's many
thousands
more.
of these things that are yet to be studied.
Well, the detection methods have gotten where they can detect nanograms, I guess, which are like
Yeah,
point
parts per trillion.
zeros, you know, it's like 8 zeros.
Yeah, when you get down that kind of level, you gotta make sure false detections, you gotta be really careful with it, because
Does
imagine
the
how easy
equipment
that
have
could
it
be.
on it? I mean, it's everywhere, so
It's
it's
everywhere,
really hard
yeah.
to, yeah.
But we have a emerging contaminants team that works internally that keeps an eye on what's going on in that space, and they're doing a pretty good job keeping us hooked up with what we need to be worrying about. Great question.
Yeah, good question. Okay. All right, so with that, we'll transition over into wastewater, and kind of take a similar path, talking through the wastewater spend. Just, first want to start out and kind of orientate everybody to the wastewater system. Our footprint is, if you look at our footprint right there, the outline of our service territories in red, if you look at it, it's a little bit bigger than our water footprint. You can see we got in East Knoxville, we got Northeast Knox County, more of Northeast Knox County is included in our footprint right there. And you can see the sewer mains show up in green right there, but you can see in East Knox County, we don't have as much density of lines out there, but that's something we'll talk about because that area is really growing a lot. We have, as opposed to the water or one water treatment plant, we have 4 wastewater treatment plants, so a little bit more there. We got 64 lift stations, and then about 74,000 customers, going on 74,000 customers. So kind of just looking at an overview of the spend that we have for the wastewater division. Capital, $264 million over the course of those 6 years. O&M, $307 million over the course of those 6 years. And then kind of similar to what we've seen with the other 3 utilities, wanted to break it out with a pie chart. And this one's a little simplified, right? It has a little less pieces of the pie right here. We can see that in fiscal years 25, we're spending about $35 million on capital investment. Between FY 26 and then 30, $210 million. You can see, if you look at the pie chart, you can see the bottom right there, about probably going on 2/3 of our spend will be on collection system rehabilitation. And that includes basin projects where we're out doing big area projects on the wastewater side for more asset renewal. Also our short line program, which we'll talk about a little bit later, and then also system upgrades. Facility upgrades and treatment plant upgrades take up about 1/3 of the system. That's that brown slice right there, and also the blue. We'll talk a bit more about that too. And actually, as we kind of kick off into it, we'll talk about the treatment plant projects there. We're spending about $44 million across all 4 of our plants over the course of the 6 years. Want to highlight, we've talked about it before, but the consent decree is over. So during the consent decree, we did a significant amount of work at our treatment plants to work on resiliency and also capacity. As we did work out in the collection system, we also needed to do work at the plants to make sure that all that wastewater we're able to make sure that we were within limits and things like that of the EPA consent decree. So just want to highlight that the consent decree is over. A couple months ago, Josh Johnson came and talked about the KUB's the disinfection project that we're doing at Kauai. That's a really significant project that we'll be doing, and we'll be working on that between fiscal years 25 and 27. And we've talked a little bit, I think Josh talked about chlorine gas, and there's just hazards around chlorine gas and potential leaks and stuff like that. And the good news, and Josh expressed it when he was here a couple of months ago, is the fact that we're already off chlorine gas and already using a temporary system for bleach as a disinfectant, which is a good thing. This project will make it to where we can, we'll be building a larger area to where we can use it and use it more kind of on a mass scale right there at the plant. Some of the other projects that we have, they're more kind of asset renewal, and I call asset renewal more like life cycle type projects. We got clarification equipment that we're replacing at Kauai, and also working on upgrading some of the covers for the digesters. And then at Loves Creek, we have a preliminary treatment project, which is, it will work on some of the things at the beginning of the plant, which is like pumping and grit screening and things like that. There'll be a project out there that'll be running through FY 30. And that's, if you look down at the bottom right there, that's sort of a rendering of right there where Joan Cronin Way comes into Nayland, or at the plant. That'll be the new building where we'll be putting the chlorine disinfection system in there. We're kind of repurposing an existing footprint right there and just building a new building on top of it. We talked about remote sites out in the wastewater collection system, and really that's more pump station projects. We also have 6 storage tanks for wet weather events. So across the course of the plan, we'll be spending out $39 million on those type of projects. And those type of projects typically, they'll go in and do rehabilitation of an existing pump station, upgrade pumps, upgrade, generators, things like that. make sure that we're meeting the capacities and things like that that we need to. The biggest project that we have coming up is the Walker Springs Force Main and Pump Station, which will be starting in fiscal years 25 and run through fiscal years 26. It's a $14 million project, so it's pretty significant for us. And this is a rendering up here on the top right is a rendering of what the new station will look like. It's actually going to be sitting right across from the old station, so it'll be a new station. We've had an overflow out there, and actually I looked up some of the statistics on it back last year in 23. You know, we obviously keep track of our overflows and how much wastewater we lose, you know, as we have overflows. And that one SSO outside the station accounts for about 50% of the whole volume in total. So this project is going to upgrade the pumping capacity and the force main size, so we'll be able to get rid of that overflow after this project's finished up. Also wanted to highlight, and we've highlighted for some of the other things, that we'll be getting about $4.75 million in ARPA funding for that project too, so that's really going to help on the cost of that project. It's significant. We talked a little bit about Boyd's Bridge earlier on the water side, but also on the wastewater side. If you'll recall, back when the water line blew out, the wastewater line was compromised too. So we have a temporary repair out there that we're going to be replacing. We're going to be replacing in fiscal years 25, and that same contractor that'll be doing the water will be doing the wastewater out there too at the same time. So probably end up boring 2 lines into the river and catching on the other side and tying it back together. We have a couple other pump stations that we'll be doing. Harrison Keep, Wingate, and Mascot, and just down at the bottom right, that photo, and we've probably seen it before, but that's where that's the temporary force main that they put in last year. That's land that we laid a new pipe on top of on the bottom of the river. Once we get that new line under the river, we'll actually pull that out and get rid of that one. So we're going to talk about our collection system rehabilitation. You know, we talked about earlier that part of the pie that's more than 50% of our spend over the course of the next 6 years. And actually, we're spending about $144 million on projects related to collection system rehabilitation. And really, these are kind of like we talked about with the water, where we're strategically targeting certain types of pipe. We do the same thing on the wastewater side. So we're strategically targeting clay, brick, and concrete pipe. That's some of our older pipe, and that's most likely to have issues with cracking and potential failures and stuff that cause SSOs. If you look at the top right, that pie graph right there, you can see about 64% of the system is newer pipes, it's plastic, ductile iron, and line pipes. And then that 36% is that older type of pipe, the concrete, clay, and brick that we're targeting with these projects. We're planning to rehabilitate or replace about 66 miles of pipe across multiple basin projects. You can see that chart in the bottom right kind of shows the mileage that we'll be doing each year replacing. Fiscal years 25 and 26 are a little bit lower, and that's really because we're just spending a little bit more money on pump stations across those 2 years. That'll be coming back up in fiscal year 27. Also want to highlight just a couple notable projects. I work with the city of Knoxville in Fort Sanders. So in fiscal years 25 and 26, we'll be doing 2 different parts of Fort Sanders. So we've done gas upgrades there. We're finishing up water upgrades there. We'll be doing replacing about 5 miles of wastewater pipe up in Fort Sanders. And we're working with the city, so as we finish areas, the city is going back under their contract and paving, overlaying those roads. So we'll have all new underground utilities and new roads up there in Fort Sanders. So that was kind of a good combination. I think that's a good kind of win-win for everybody up in Fort Sanders. Also want to talk a little bit more just about the short line program. So collection system rehabilitation, we bid out all these projects that are really, really large projects. They're big area projects where we're going in and specifically targeting those older type of pipes. The short line program is something that it's more of a kind of concise, sort of targeted program. We're spending about $29 million on projects across those 6 years. Typically, each year we do about 15 projects per year, and what these are is, something will come up during the course of the year, or we'll have some of these projects identified, but they're smaller in scope and scale, and typically they originate from some kind of problem. Our underground crews will find something out in the system, or there'll be an SSO or something like that, and we'll actually design those, bid those out, and get those done in a pretty quick time frame. So we're doing about 15 of those a year. We also want to highlight that we've just recently started using a new internal crew. We started wastewater. So I mentioned before we have 3 water crews that do capital work. Now we have another one for wastewater. So I want to mention that because that actually provides us a bunch of flexibility too, where we don't necessarily have to bid things out. We can just call on that crew and get them to do certain things for us. We also, I think, would be remiss not to highlight that, all these different programs that we're talking about, they kind of work in a sort of a synergistic method. So you can see like preventative maintenance. If you look at the photo up in the top left, that's where we're actually sending the camera down the sewer line to inspect it. And that way we're able to figure out what's the condition of it. You know, if we're doing a rehabilitation project, we'll know where to work and things like that. So they do that. Also flushing, manhole inspections to see if there's any issues with those. Smoke testing, checks for potential cross contaminations between downspouts and the sewer system, which we obviously don't want. So, you know, we have the preventative maintenance. So things we find there may be some issues with like a partially collapsed pipe or something like that. We'll send that over to blockage abatement. So blockage abatement will send another contractor out there. They'll go out there and try to remedy it. They may go out there and cut roots out of a pipe or something like that and try to open it up. May end up being a point repair if something's partially collapsed or something like that. So those kind of are the quick hitter type things, and that's sort of where we're going out and looking into the system and seeing what's going on. On the back end of that, like I just mentioned, we have the short line project. So if we have an SSO or something comes up that we need kind of immediate work on, we can sort of tailor a project to that, work on that. Then the collection system rehabilitation is more the asset renewal, right? It's more targeting the older pipe just across the system to make sure that we get that out. That reduces I&I inflow and infiltration into the system, which causes overflows and also collapses and things like that. We talked a little bit about at the beginning. I just want to highlight, you know, new development in East Knox County. Obviously, you know, John mentioned this before too, but, you know, growth accelerating all across Knox County. And specifically for us, we're seeing a lot of acceleration out in East Knox County. If you've been following the news, you'll know that Knox County growth plan, you know, that's been in the news a lot and that's been approved. But there's the Knox County growth plan is actually showing a lot. The graphic up in the right showing quite a few expanded growth areas out in East Knox County, and that's kind of where they see growth going to. It's just kind of an open area. Like I mentioned before, you know, we don't have as much infrastructure out in East Knox County, so we're working towards making sure that we get that set up. But, you know, one of the things I think we're seeing is people start moving to Knoxville and Knox County. You know, a lot more of those spots towards the city and things like that are filling in. And so actually building in East Knox County is becoming more economically viable, right? Where 5-10 years ago, it wasn't necessarily the case. Now people are coming and they may be working remotely or something like that. They don't necessarily have a tie to downtown. So this area is really starting to take off. And one of the things we've done to sort of help make sure that we're ready for that is we're working on this East Knox County wastewater master plan. So as these areas of the county grow out, we'll have a plan of, you know, making sure that we understand what needs to go there. Our new service folks will have an idea of how we can serve that customer and things like that. And that's really going to help us and sort of navigate this growth out in that part of the county.
I've got a quick question before you move on from that. And I don't know that this is correct, but I'd always heard that one of the reasons that East Knox had not developed as quickly was because there's a higher amount of rock in that area that makes it more difficult.
That's correct.
So what does that mean for extending a wastewater system into East Knox County?
Yeah, that's a good question. So it's, you know, typically rock, if the stuff that we have in East Knox County is typically a combination of kind of low pressure, kind of grinder pumps, and then also two gravity mains. But obviously gravity mains, you know, can end up being very deep. So if you know there's rock in the alignment, that's just going to add to the cost of it. And that kind of goes back to the point about it. You know, years ago it wasn't necessarily economically feasible. They go out there and, you know, developers know that they have to put utilities in, and they're pretty knowledgeable about how to price that kind of stuff out. And that was probably one of the factors that have sort of have kept them from going out that direction. Good question. So it's kind of like similar to what we did on the water side. We kind of want to highlight some of the technology that we're using on the wastewater side too. You know, obviously that's going to help improve the efficiency of things we're doing and also, you know, system performance. The first thing I want to highlight is a program that we're using on the wastewater side called Sewer AI, and it's essentially artificial intelligence that's helping us code the pipes. So we showed that photo earlier of somebody putting a camera down the line. So in a traditional sense, you know, the person there's somebody working to help put the camera down the line. Then there's somebody back in the truck that's actually watching the video. That is, you know, as they get to a certain spot, they'll stop the camera. They'll code the camera. You know, they'll code the defect or something like that. If they see that in the pipe, and then they'll start that back up. So now you've got this new artificial intelligence. So as the camera runs down the line, you can see in that photo on the right, these green boxes start showing up as it picks up defects in the pipe. It actually measures and codes the things as it goes down the pipe, so I don't have to stop. So it's really sped up the amount of time or it's actually decreased the amount of time it takes to do these inspections, which thereby decreases cost, right? So it's actually one of the things we found too is that as far as on the QAQ side on the back end, it's actually more accurate than people coding it themselves, because it's, you know, if you have different camera operators working, there's inconsistencies between them, and this thing is very consistent. So we found that it decreases the amount of time to do the inspections and also decreases the amount of QA/QC on the back end of the data. So it's been a really big benefit that we found. Also, John mentioned this before on the electric side, and it's a little more geared towards the electric, but it's also it also has benefits for the wastewater side. It's the new SCADA platform. So we're modernizing our SCADA platform. The one that was there has been there for 20 plus years. But on the wastewater side, it's really going to have some new enhancements for us. Monitoring statuses and pump stations and tanks and processes will be improved. It also has a lot of analytical tools that's going to help the system operators be able to manage the system a little bit better. So we're really excited about that. That coming into play. I guess it's next year. I think that'll be up and running. So just kind of want to wrap up the wastewater with some of the Century 2 outcomes, some of the good things that are going on, and this is the investment that the board has approved over the years that's really helped our system. Sanitary sewer overflows, since 2004, those have decreased by 80%. You can see the graph on the right. The dry weather SSOs, which are ones that are usually caused by potentially collapsed pipes or blockages, things like that, that aren't related to rainfall, are the green ones. And then the blue ones right there are wet weather events. And that's where it's raining and they're more rainfall influenced. And you can see it's really more, it's easier to drive down the wet weather SSOs. It's a little bit harder to get the dry weather SSOs because they can come from a combination of different events. But also want to highlight that March 2024 was the first month since we've started recording SSOs back in 2003 that we didn't have an SSO for an entire month. So that's a big deal. I think we've broken that record, but that was a full month that stood with no SSO. So we're excited about that. Want to make the board aware of that. And then also pipe replacement. We talked about our collection system rehabilitation. Over the course of that same time frame right there, the past 20 years, we've replaced about a third of the collection system. We've either rehabilitated or replaced it. So that's about 450 miles to kind of put that in perspective. It's a lot of pipe. So we've been able to do that, and that's really helped decrease that overall number right there. And then to also just finally want to highlight some of those comprehensive programs that we've got on the O&M side and the capital side, the short line program, the collection system rehabilitation program, some of those preventative programs. They all sort of work together, and that's really helped drive that down really quickly too. And we're hoping that that's going to be a continuing trend, decreasing SSOs. So that kind of wraps up the wastewater. Any questions on wastewater?
Okay, we are about time for a break. So if there's no other questions from any of the commissioners, let's take no more than a 10-minute break and re-adjourn back here, ready to finish the rest of the program. Thank you. Okay, I think we are ready to get started again. Jamie, looks like you're up with fiber.
That's right. Commissioners, good to talk to you today about fiber as always. I'll try to keep us on schedule so we can be respectful of your time. But as I get started, it feels like, Groundhog Day, I guess, again. It's hard to believe that it's been a year since we last sat here and talked about where we were going to go in fiscal year 24. My daughter graduates from high school this year, and so I'm really wanting to, or next year, I should say, so I'm really not looking forward to FY 25, but I'd like to slow down time if I could, but in the fiber division, it's been another fast and furious year. And I think before we kind of look ahead to where we're going, it's always good to take a pulse on where we've been and kind of celebrate our accomplishments. It was this time last year that, no different than our other 4 utilities, supply chain was hitting us hard. Anything with a chip was stuck overseas or in production. That affected us from everything from servers to trucks, anything, you name it. Good news is, much like our other utilities, and you all are seeing your business and personal life, that's really freed up quite a bit. So we're really not suffering from that as much anymore. We were learning this business. I mean, again, it's been an acclimating process in every way. We knew going into it that we would be learning, and it really is a continuous improvement project every day, and that continues today. But this time last year, we were learning how to really construct, not necessarily underground, that's normal to us, but at a different depth and a different corridor, if you will, very tight spaces with other utilities and other telecom folks, and acclimate new contractors to our system. And at the same time, especially in the underground world, we were understanding that we were impacting our customers in a very meaningful way. In some cases, we needed to communicate better, we needed to restore yards better, and we really, at this time last year, really put in some methods to improve that. And pleased to respond again. While not perfect, things have really improved. Hopefully, your all's email and phone quotient has gone way down in that regard, and so we've improved. So, but really proud of where we've come. And this time last March, our customer base was just starting to grow. We were sitting at about 1,500 customers, and really poised for what we would hope would be a good year. And indeed, it was. Where we currently stand is we in full have installed about 1,700 miles of fiber. If you recall, back when we started this, we had about 300 miles on system. So that gives you a perspective of how far we've come just in the very short amount of time of this year would be our year 3 build. As we look into year FY 25, that would be our 4th year of build. So you'll also recall it's about 5,000 miles of fiber that we're putting out. So as I'll show you in a second, FY 25 really gets us about to the halfway point of our build. So we're on schedule there. We have service in front of about 50,000 customers available. We're in front of, if you will, another 20,000 customers in multiple dwelling units. And Andrew Himaleski was here a couple months ago to talk about our status of our build and some of our challenges. And we'll talk at a little bit deeper level about our multiple dwelling units, or MDUs. You may recall those are anything that where more folks than one live under a given roof. So townhomes, condos, even in some cases strip malls on the commercial side, but traditionally apartment buildings is what we're talking about. And we'll talk about how, as Gabe referenced, how we'll go to address those. And as we sit here today, we have more than 8,500 customers. Actually, to be very specific, as of this morning, 8,789. So we're very appreciative of those customers coming on board with KUB Fiber. We've seen good growth in all of the blue areas, which are our current service areas on the map. And speaking of that growth, it's really been exponential this past year. If you look back, this is since inception there in September, October of when we started serving customers through March. It doesn't have April's numbers there. But really, this time last year, again, sitting about 1,500 customers were on this chart as the end of March. It was just short of 8,000. You can really see how that curve on the left is our residential, the curve on the right is our business customers. It's really almost that hyperbolic curve. It's really kind of taken off in that regard. As we entered summer, opened up in Luttrell and some of our rural areas, as we continue to develop our existing areas that we'd already opened, and then as we, at the end of the calendar year, this past December, opened up Rocky Hill, and then most recently in Maynardville and the House Mountain areas, we've really seen strong growth. March was our strongest month to date. We added over 1,000 customers, and even halfway through April, we're sitting right at 1,000 customers of growth as well this month. So really starting to take off in that regard. You can see on the left there, the residential customers. It's kind of hard to see the differentiation of colors, but most of our customers are taking the gig. As you recall, that's our base entry package. We do have the gig 2.5 and the gig 10. We do have some customers that have the gig 2.5, and you would never be able to see the colors, not even with younger eyes than mine. I can't, my eyes are too old at this point to see anything up there. But there is one gig 10 customer, and so we're appreciative of that customer as they do apparently some heavy lifting from work from home. So we know who that person is, and we appreciate him. But we've been really strong on the business side as well. We have approximately 300 business customers right now, really strong, and our products are very attractive in the business space. We're very competitive from a pricing perspective, and then we've really been able to kind of, I would say, cater to the business community and what they need and specific need. We serve everything strong in areas, everything from, from coffee shops to churches to small business, and even some larger corporations that you know the names of here in town. We've been very fortunate to be very strong in this area and continue to grow. Variety of different packages on that side as well too, but I'll call out one that's new and it's small. You wouldn't be able to spot it as well either, as we've been nimble in responding to the business community's needs. When we launched this with this board, we didn't have up there, you can kind of see it on the chart, the gig 2.5 at work. We didn't have that. But even here recently, we've added that as a product because the business community, there are some who needed something a little faster than the gig. And so we can do that. And so we've responded to them. We've responded with our bigger phone offerings, offering more complex solutions in that regard. And so folks are really being very appreciative of how KUB Fiber is responding to their individual needs in the business community. One thing we think that has helped that growth is our marketing efforts. And so I want to take a couple of slides here to just talk about where we see the brand heading and how we've done this past year. You may recall that this time last year we presented really probably the first results of a brand health survey that we did. And that survey is a statistically significant survey carried out by research partners with Tombras and a firm that they use. And statistically significant, over 400 respondees. You know, I say that so, you know, you can lean on these. This isn't just, you know, a kind of an absolute survey response. But our awareness last year at this time, and you can kind of see that on the small chart on the right, this is an unaided question, meaning no pre-planned answers. This wasn't multiple choice. This was open-ended. Is when you think of a internet provider in East Tennessee, who do you think of first? Unaided, last year, 6% of the respondees of the survey said KUB. We were very pleased with that. This year, when we re-performed that same survey, asked that same question, 14% of the respondees said that. So that shows the needle's moving higher, unaided. Very pleased with that, up 130%. 1 in 5 customers think of KUB first in that particular way. So if your customers aren't aware of you, how can you sell to them? So again, really the first phase of marketing and moving that customer through the journey, ultimately through to purchase. Similar deal is asking about consideration. Is which internet provider are you considering using, kind of moving them again on down the chain, if you will, to purchase. Last year, again, on the baseline there, you'll see the 25% of the respondees last year said, I'm considering KUB Fiber. One of the cool stats from last year was that Tombras let us know that was really a market position in this space of somebody that had been in the business for about 10 years. And so we were just kind of over the moon that even in such a short amount of time, folks were considering using us. Well, that's up 60% this year from this time last year. And you can see that 40% of the respondees said this year that, again, unaided, that they were considering KUB Fiber. And so what we can see kind of from the word cloud there is we're really starting to use some real estate and space there that the incumbents have long kind of owned in that particular regard, and we're really kind of, you know, causing them to take a hit in that particular space as well too. So very, very pleased with that. Another result from that survey, and the graphics on the board really represent that brand funnel. And this is the first half, I guess you would say, that brand funnel. And the typical shape of that should be a funnel. It should be basically an upside-down pyramid, if you will. And so as you are aware of a product, you're familiar with a product, you consider a product, the bottom half of that funnel ultimately takes you to purchase, if you will. Last year at this time, again, you can see our results on the left. We're looking a little skinny in the middle there, so to speak, but we had good position both in awareness and consideration. This was aided. They gave a list of providers and asked them very similar questions. Who are you aware of? Who are you familiar with? Who are you considering? And again, year one, very pleased with where we're at, but you can see the gains we've made in year two on the right. At the end of the day, we still have an awareness campaign to go through. You can never quit that, but it really shows that we've kind of broken through our market with the position that folks are aware of us and considering us. So what are the key takeaways beyond that our awareness campaigns are working? The folks that understand this data much better than us say there is a competitive advantage with this consideration bucket. And you kind of see the size difference here versus some of the other incumbents in the market. That is a distinct competitive advantage for us in this market space. We still have the biggest opportunities for growth in our familiarity. And if you kind of think about that, whether you're purchasing a car or considering going on a trip or whatever else, being aware of the product, familiar with the details of the product, moves you towards consideration. And then once you start considering the product, you're that much step further to purchase. And that's really where we live. But we believe through our marketing efforts and the word of mouth of our customers, we're positioned for a great year in that looking forward. So any questions on kind of the marketing research and the data? And if I get going and you all have a question, please interrupt me and ask a question. I want to be sure we're addressing your all's questions today. All right. One of the main reasons I know that we were all excited about getting in this space, especially this board, was to serve those that didn't have service. We were very fortunate to receive, as you all recall, about $15 million in grants from the state of Tennessee as part of that first round of ARPA funding that came down. Pleased to say that we're meeting our obligations in those areas. If you recall back on the map, you saw that upper northeast quadrant really lit up blue. Granger County is complete. We finished that recently, and so all of that grant area is done. Approximately $4.6 million of that is reimbursable, and we've gotten back 4.1 of that. So we've almost even gotten our money back on that. Of that tranche of grantees, we are the first to complete an award. So good news, bad news about that is congratulations. We turned in our homework early. The bad news is that with this funding being from flow down from the feds, there were new requirements for that, and the state and us are both learning as we go through that. I think we are helping the state to understand that in many cases, and so it's a good thing, though. It's a very collaborative process. The state's been great to work with out of their ECD office, but again, we are just about to close that one out. Union County is 70% complete. $6.5 million of that reimbursable. We've gotten back 2.3, and I think Brian just told me a check came in the mail this morning, so a little bit more money there. That's going well. We anticipate that we will complete Union County in that area with the last release inside of Union County, which is slated for the end of this calendar year. So good progress there. That's the bulk. Obviously, you can see kind of that $15 million. We have in our other areas of Jefferson and Sevier, smaller grant eligible areas, and we will complete those. You can see there Sevier County in summer of 25 and Jeff County in the fall of 25. It's really been a great story, and it makes us feel really good about the purpose of what we're doing. This is the Luttrell Library, a picture of that. That was the day of their installation. And it's great to hear community members say that they are able to enjoy, from an infrastructure perspective like the library, community benefit in that regard, but then even homeowners. And one of the neatest things that we've heard is now folks have a viable phone in their house to be able to make phone calls, because there's really, in many cases, if there's no internet, guess what? There's really no copper phone lines either, and then cell service is sketchy at best. And so we learned that when we were up there installing, when our cell phones didn't work and our radios were hampered as well too. But at the end of the day, just even having some of those basic quality of life type things is really, really kind of moving those communities forward, and we're really excited about what that means in the future for them as well. So as we turn the page to FY25 and look ahead to where we're going, as I said earlier, this is really kind of it is a big year. It's not kind of a big year. It is a big year as far as the amount of growth that we'll have as we turn the page to year 4. And you'll see that by adding that 1,400 additional miles of fiber, that we will get very close to over halfway. Obviously, they're 5,000 miles. We'll hit 3,100 miles. We'll go over that number. We'll make our services available to 65,000 additional customers, and that brings us to a total of almost available to 115,000 customers. Again, we can go over that total to the extent we can kind of get up on the curve of our MDU issue, so we could be positioned for a really big year. As we end this fiscal year, right as we cross the finish line, we will begin service in parts of the Halls community along with West Hills, and so you'll see those areas start to light up on the map. And then as we turn that corner, hopefully right in time for football season, we will serve the UT area, and I wish Commissioner Feinbaum was here because we will serve Sequoia Hills area. He has been looking forward to that, so hopefully we can get those areas hooked up just in time for football. Also of interest is as we turn that corner and go into FY25, we will serve areas that I'll call partially unserved. As you get into Kodak and some of the deeper north areas, deeper south areas, we continue to hear from our customers about the lack of a viable service. And so we will definitely serve those by the end of the fiscal year. And so that map looks very different than what I just showed you a minute ago. I mean, that's the reason it becomes a big year. And since this is an LRP plan, we focus a lot in the short term because we're still growing and in startup mode. But to take a peek into next year, if you just kind of rock back and forth between that map, you really start to see those blue areas fill up quite a bit differently. We'll add approximately another 700 miles of fiber in FY26, approaching about 3,800 miles, making it available to almost another 20,000 customers and reaching that total of 134 available in that regard. The areas that we will serve then will be Middlebrook, Pike, and Western Avenue area. We will finish up that remainder of Union County, Millertown, Pike, Holston, Whittle Springs, Straw Plains, and then that last grant area of Jefferson County. So really almost start talking about where we're not serving as opposed to where we are serving. So that's pretty exciting in that regard. So beyond just the standard goals of building, where are we going to focus this year as we look ahead to FY25? Well, it's all about growing our customer base, and we've set a goal this year of since we're doubling our construction, let's double our customers. Again, if we're going to end this fiscal year somewhere between 9,000 and 10,000 customers, we want to target growth of about 9,300 customers in FY25. But beyond that, we have two key focus areas that we want to address, one of which we've mentioned a couple times in this meeting and prior, is address the challenges presented by multiple dwelling units, and I'll go into a little bit more detail there. And as I've talked about our marketing efforts being successful in the awareness, we've really got to turn the corner and kind of focus more on that conversion, because we've got this phrase that inertia is real, and I'll talk a little bit more about that here in just a second. So first on the MDU front. So as we told the board a couple months ago, construction is just challenging in these areas. There's a lot of parts and pieces, there's a lot of people involved, and even in the situation where you've got willing and excited customers and a willing and excited property manager, there's still just a lot of coordination to happen. And so we've really focused our efforts and thoughts about getting a game plan around how to tackle this from a multifaceted approach. And so I want to go over just some basic tactics that we're going to employ going forward. First, if you look at the diagram on the left, just of a typical, in this case, a high-rise might be apartment unit, I kind of like to use the imagery of tic-tac-toe, or for those of us who remember the Hollywood squares, maybe it's an image there you want to remember, but instead of going, I know Hood's a big fan of Hollywood squares there. I know that, typically we would go across the row, if you will, meaning that we would enter the building at a common utility junction space, and then as we would serve each floor, we would go into their attic, pierce the firewall, go next door, go up in the attic, pierce the firewall, and go across. That requires coordination. That works partially well. Coordinating, if we all lived on the same floor of this building, how hard would it be to coordinate that if we had to be home to do that? And so that's one reason this has been really slow. So our folks in the engineering construction realm says, well, instead of trying to score by going across the road, can we go up the column? And so something as simple as that, you'd think, well, yeah, if you can do that, why not? We've started doing some of that. We've tried entering into some of these buildings where it makes sense and it's aesthetically okay as well too, is even up the back of the buildings and going into the units that way too, if we can work with the property owner, if that's acceptable to them. We've also decided to maybe not wait and light an entire building until everybody's available. Obviously, we don't want to offer service and say, well, Bill's available, but Claudia's not, because Claudia wasn't there to let us in or something like that. But we've started, sorry, Claudia, I didn't mean that personally. I should have picked somebody else, Debbie. But at the end of the day, the notion might be is that we would go ahead and light that customer, poke through their firewall, and just send that fiber through on the other side. And then either wait for, in my poor example, Claudia to call me and say, hey, I hear it's available. And then I could hook her up, or wait for Cynthia to say, hey, I really want fiber. What's the holdup? And I say, well, unfortunately, it's your next door neighbor. And so utilizing hopefully some gingerly addressed feedback, that perhaps some peer pressure there might drive some of that. So just some kind of common sense approaches to some construction differences in that regard. Secondarily, really the rest of them are pretty common sense as well too. From a coordination perspective, we realize that we need our engineers and construction folks doing that phase. We need our sales folks doing that phase. But there really is an in-between. That coordination has really been a big burden, working with property managers, individual homeowners, scheduling up, as we want to provide more flexibility for folks to schedule when we let them in. Now, it's not during 8 to 5. Maybe it has to be before work or after traditional work hours, weekends. We need somebody kind of running, rough shed over that to be sure that everything's going to be okay and that we can meet the customer's needs in that regard. We're looking to fill that role pretty quickly here soon, and so to have an MDU coordinator that'll sit in that space and really that be their purpose in life. Anytime you got a backlog, anytime you've got more work to do, you add resources. So what we've done is added 2 more engineering firms to do the designs of these MDUs. They are very unique, every one you go to. It is not a cookie cutter approach. And as well as we've just added more construction resources. What we do in our typical utility world when we got backlogs, we add more crews, and we're doing that as we speak as well. And then lastly, we're doing events there, and you can kind of see that by the tent there. We continue, and really one of the tactics we're using to get through from a conversion perspective is meet the customers where they're at. And so recently at one of our apartment complexes here in the area that's available for service, had our first morning event in which our marketing folks were there with coffee and donuts to meet the customers and try to make some conversions on their way to work. And so they learned a lot from that, and they'll continue to tweak those. But again, just some creative ways that we think we can break through in that space in the MDUs. So key focus area, more to come.
Is it possible to get in while they're building?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Without revealing too many trade secrets, some of the to folks that may be interested in watching today. No, these developments like Belltown, for instance, we reached out to them very early on. So if you went out to Belltown today, where there's a model, if you entered in there looking at all the other nice treatments of the fixtures and everything else, you'd see that neighborhood's lit by KUB fiber. There's our marketing materials are already in there, so forth and so on. We've lit the model with KUB fiber, so if they wanted to hook up and try it and test it, they're available to do that. So absolutely, we're working. I would much rather go into any structure early as opposed to late. Absolutely.
And Jamie, for an existing building, does it always have to be daisy chained?
There has to be connectivity like that. Now, I think from a bulk wiring perspective, yes. I think there are opportunities to do a little what we'll call kind of a point-to-point, but you have to have an aggregation point, and then you can split from there. It's an efficiency in construction. It's an efficiency in just design. So I think as time goes on, if we can't overcome the hurdle of the traditional approach, we'll continue to do that. Some communities or some providers like this, I won't say they ignore MDUs, but they for sure, it's not an area of focus. And they wait more for the inertia to be from the consumer side as opposed to just trying to knock on the door and go in. And I get it. I mean, from a property manager perspective, most of these folks are already served in some way. What's their motivation for allowing another provider to come in and have to deal with this, so forth and so on. So that inertia is tough enough for each of us as individual consumers, and I'll talk about that in a second. But then to aggregate that is a whole nother deal. But definitely where a lot of the other providers that we talk with a lot of time deal with is very much on the new construction. If they can get in early, then that's a lot less headache. But we want to be sure that, as folks, and we hear so many folks are saying, well, I really want to be able to have this service. What do I need to do? Well, get your HOA involved, get your tenants involved, your fellow folks. And that's really how we're breaking through in that particular regard. Better progress on this year than last, and we'll continue to get better at it. We'll get creative.
do we wire an entire building even if we don't have I mean,
Yes.
potentially speaking,
Yeah,
no one there?
especially if that property owner kind of approaches us first and says, I want KUB fiber in here, then absolutely. Again, Belltown's a good example, and then the KCDC homes over here near Harriet Tubman and Bell Street were another one in which we got in there early, wired the building up, and we're sitting and waiting for customers to call us then.
Is it cost effective enough in the sense that, I mean, I guess my question would be, in a multi-building of like 10 units, you know, the cost of putting that in there versus how many people do I need to
make it
actually
worthwhile.
sign up to make it work?
Well, and again, if you think about this as a utility side investment, what we anticipate, and regardless of what Mr. Gresham says, I like these other applications as well too, that they need that fiber too at some point in time.
Yeah.
So no, we would definitely, the incremental cost, especially on a new construction, or at least if something's going through renovation, minuscule compared to going in there after the fact and poking holes through walls and putting up molding again and
Yep.
so forth and so on. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Much rather do that. Good question. Anything else on MDUs? You all will hear more about that since, as Gabe mentioned, that is one of our strategic initiatives this year. I've said it a number of times, and our second area of focus is I'll call it just consumer inertia. You know, turns out that getting folks to move to purchase on anything, and for those of you all who've lived this space in the for-profit world, you're saying, tell me about it, I'm sure. But to get folks to move to that next step of purchase is a bigger challenge. Good news is as word of mouth gets out, things start to snowball and that moves. But we're going to be aggressive this year in moving that needle forward. And, you know, part of the challenge in this particular product set is we start to understand from folks in this space that understand is a lot of folks don't want to switch for two reasons. One of which, it's a hassle to switch. For those of you all that have already switched, you've told me, like, I had to be on the phone with some folks we know forever, or the case may be. And the other thing is usually that switching means a lot of times you're switching from one poor ISP to another. You're not able to switch away from a provider that would solve your problems, if you will. And so we've got to overcome that particular issue. We believe that's our goal, is to demonstrate and convince our consumer base that KUB truly is different in that regard. You all have mentioned it. We've talked about it. Our customers say it. What's our edge? True gig speeds, great local customer service, undeniably Knoxville. And so you're going to see in our creative, in our advertising, in our social media, everything that the notion that switching is finally worth it. That we are different, that folks who've experienced know that it's different. And so I think you'll be very pleased in the days ahead of what you see in that particular regard. But again, this evil enemy of inertia is really kind of, we're almost physically embodying that as a thing, but we're going to be tackling that this year. So those are really our two key initiatives beyond just doing the blocking and tackling of building and getting this out to the folks. Any questions in that regard before I turn the page to financials? Yeah. All right. So from a fiscal perspective, again, LRP view, this will be about the only time you see an LRP view of fiber, because again, we're still in build out mode. We're really talking about those individual budget years and what we're trying to achieve in that year. I'll just point out that in the same type of time frame that we've talked about the other four utilities, you can see the expenses there. Fiber is becoming more and more real as a division. If you see that O&M total there over the course of that long range plan, it rivals that of some of our other divisions. Capital, as we've talked about, and I'll mention here again, fiber's pretty light on capital, but on O&M and the fees that we pay, it's really starting to kind of rival the other divisions in that regard. So want to talk about, when we talk about fiber to home, really want to talk about the electric portion of the whole service. Again, those numbers are included in Mr. Gresham's presentation earlier this morning, but want to kind of reference it as a tandem here as we talk about our build out. And as I've just mentioned, as all know, electric, heavy on capital, fiber, heavy on O&M, and we'll go through those details. So from an electric division perspective, we're on plan to spend right at $90 million this year, of which the bulk of that is the network, $70 million, 1,150 miles of aerial construction and 250 miles of underground construction. We will install, as John said earlier, 144 smart switches as part of that electric modernization project. And I will say too, that things that we don't talk about in here a whole lot, because it's really kind of in the weeds, but Gabe referenced in the first part of his presentation, getting to hear from some of our folks this week that use operational technology. This fiber, just the fiber proper, is making such a difference in their day-to-day lives and the technology they are using out in the field. And that's across all other 4 of our divisions. And so I really want to be sure I relay to this board that this $90 million investment this year goes well beyond just the FLISR in this space, well beyond the broadband. It really is a modernization project that positions us to do a lot of great things every day, from a monitoring and communicating with our field devices. Electronic equipment of $6 million. That's a lot of the brains of the network that go into those huts that many of you all been able to see, either through presentations or on your tours. Routers, networks, optics, the network switches, optics, those type of things. And then $8 million in services to the home with that projected growth that we have this particular year. And then O&M expenses. We've learned this year that as you get a bigger system and more footprint and existing customers, trees take down fiber lines too every now and then, and car wrecks impact us as well too. So we work alongside of our other utility folks in responding to trouble and working nights and weekends as well. So some of that O&M is part of that as well. So any question on the electric side from a financial perspective? All right, on the fiber side, again, you'll see very heavy on the O&M front. Smaller capital expenses related mostly to us getting to the internet, the equipment required to do that, very specifically in the point of presence in Ashburn and in Atlanta. And then some other facility and vehicle expenses as we continue to grow. We buy more trucks and equipment in that regard as well. But heavy on the O&M, our O&M budget this fiscal year is $20 million. Our largest expense is to the electric division. You can see that on screen there, and the amount of $7 million for the use of the fiber network. So again, paying our fair share to electric for the use of its network. Labor, $3.8 million this year. We currently have 93 employees in the fiber division and look to hire another 40 within this fiscal year. So as you may recall, it's about 200 positions total that we were going to add, so we're well on our way to hitting that mark. And then $3 million there in marketing and advertising. The bulk of that goes towards media purchasing, creative research, and the use of our consultants in that regard. Any questions on the fiber side of the financials? Well, having said that, and this will be the last statistic from that survey that I shared, it's all for naught if your customers aren't happy with the product, right? You can do all the things great, but if your customers aren't happy at the end of the day after they purchase, then it's all for naught. As part of the research that we've been talking about, one of the other questions for the customers who already had KUB fiber was, how satisfied are you with the survey? Very pleased and very proud that over 96% of the respondees said they were either extremely satisfied or very satisfied with KUB service. The research staff that did the survey, the partner that Tom Brush uses, used Gabe's favorite word of unprecedented results in this particular regard. I hope, my first concern was, is this a honeymoon effect? It's not. A lot of these customers, the plurality of them, have been with us more than 6 months. So I think the new had worn off, but they were still very pleased at being with us. I hope that we haven't set a high water mark and we come back here next year and we're at 94 and feels like that's bad. But at the same point in time, we really think that it really points to the other data inside of the surveying, and that other ISPs don't even touch this number. We're going to be working towards a benchmark to understand exactly where we should be in this space, but we're very pleased right now that the surveys show that. But even more anecdotal than that, it's almost every day that on every social media platform, somebody will pose a question: should I switch to KUB fiber? And it's great when your customers are telling your story for you. We don't interact with these a whole lot as far as saying, oh yes, and here's why. But here's what happens, and you can see some of those comments on the board there, that 99.4% of the time, folks are coming out and saying, yes, you should switch. Yes, we've had it. It's great. Yes, they're delivering on their promises. And many of you all have passed me along very similar comments as well too, from your neighborhood boards and your Facebook groups and everything else. And so we're very proud of that. But at the end of the day, we think that the word of mouth is going to be one of our strongest assets this year. And as our customer base grows and as the word gets out, we think that'll be one of the other aspects that moves us ahead for a great year of growth. So very excited about where we're at, very proud of where we're at, and positioned for a good year for KUB. Any other questions?
Do you have any info on? I would
Well,
imagine
we've
there's,
got
like,
the luxury right now, even of folks that disconnect, that we have an opportunity because there are so few that we actually either reach back out to them and say, why are you, or even in the process of when they call us, well, tell us why. I would tell you the biggest reasons, folks move a lot in this town. I didn't realize it, like into town and then back out of town. A lot of that's UT, but there's a lot of churn. We have very few that say they're displeased with the product. And if we can catch them in that moment, if it's a true service issue, which there have been some, we can solve that.
but what is the answer when they're like, we're not at all satisfied, and what's the reason? Are
The
they
reason,
saying it's
the
not
reason I
fast
would tell
enough?
you that either a lot of times the competition has stepped in and given incentive would be probably my first answer to that. Is that we've seen a lot of folks say, I think Tiffany's got a friend that we've talked about that, like, I love my KUB fiber service, but they've offered me a $500 gift card. When this is over, I'll be back. And so, I'm old enough to remember the days of switching long distance carriers for a check. And I think we've got a little bit of that going on with competition right now. So I think that will wane over time. But I think that in some cases, if it's anything to do with their service, it either is a legit issue that we can address, or it's the typical, we can't make that customer happy because of what they're trying to achieve inside of their house. But I think we've been pretty good about addressing most of the true service-based issues.
Awesome.
We also talked about when we were in the early stages of this, how our TV product was going to be a streaming product from the outset. Everybody's going that way, but if you've got somebody that has been strictly a cable TV subscriber,
Right.
only use that, knows nothing about streaming, I'm wondering if we've had some people that have switched and then said, oh, I don't like this, I'm gonna go
Right.
back.
Yeah, I think we haven't had many with that. We sit at probably about 500 TV customers. And so compare that to like 85, 87. I would tell you that most of our base has already made that streaming switch.
Yeah.
Definitely there are those, I'm one, I know many of you all are too, that have made that transition. And what we hear most of is, I was concerned. And I use the analogy of, like, when I used to get a new cell phone, it took me like 2 weeks before I could figure out how to call anybody one-handed. And I think that's the same thing with the TV product, and we continue to work. I think in the familiarity wing of our plan,
Right.
I think we still probably have folks that don't even know we're offering TV, and because they hear we really push the internet in that regard. So I think what you'll see in some of our PR and creative in that regard is even talking about that. And again, we continue to refine that product every day. It's a third-party product, as you all know, and we work with them about enhancement. And I know they actually just recently pushed out an update that I saw this week that even changed kind of the view of the guide a little bit bigger. It was a little bit bigger. I like that. I could see it a little easier. But it over time though, we're going to address those very specific issues, like you're saying, Commissioner Hamilton, of oh gosh, the streaming thing seems so big, and it's really not that big. So, but no, great point.
No, it's
Excellent point.
interesting. We have fiber from PVEC, what is that?
Powell Valley.
And Sharp Chapel, and they've just rolled out free TV,
Okay.
like 5 channels.
Okay.
I can share the email with you.
Okay,
but
neat.
It's something called SFN TV Now, and you call and you get like 5 free channels, and you get to pick them, and just kind of comes with your fiber. So,
They may be handing out a SFN TV now. SFN. It could be a digital antenna kind of deal. I'm wondering about that. That's interesting.
I think it's streaming TV.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because there's no hookup, no anything.
Really? That's
Because we
neat.
already have the fiber.
Okay. Got it. I like free. Figure that out. That's great. That's right. All right. Thank you all very much. Any other questions, just let me know.
Are we ready?
We're ready.
Okay.
Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay, we're
Okay.
ready.
Get your Celeste ready. Okay.
A pen, I'm fixing to take
Okay.
notes.
So while there are a fair amount of numbers in what I'm going to share with you today, I guess maybe some good news is it's really a continuation of discussions that we have had back at the November workshop and also at the January board meeting. So not a whole lot of new information with respect to our long-range financing plans. So this might move fairly quickly. It might. And but then I will close out with an overview of the FY25 budget appropriations, which obviously that'll be one of the items that you're asked to consider at next month's board meeting. So I wanted to start out with just a quick overview of our long-term financial strategy, because this did provide the foundation of what our funding recommendations are for the additional cost that each division is facing associated with inflation and then the increases in our Century 2 investments. And basically, as you know, it centers around a balanced funding approach to fund Century 2, to fund the fiber deployment, to fund other key programs across KUB. And so that's based on system revenues or rates. It's based upon debt, using reasonable levels of debt, because that spreads the costs of long-lived assets over both current and future customers. It's also based upon looking for new customers, customer additions, new sources of revenue, and then also just from cost management, cost savings. If you can save in some areas, that helps free up funds to fund some of these projects that we're talking about. So this whole balanced approach is, the objective is to have utility systems that are reliable, resilient, and safe for our customers, but also that are affordable. So we look to maintain competitive rates with our peer utilities. That's important. And the balanced funding approach also is help ensure that our financial system, our utility systems, are financially sound over the long term, as measured in having reasonable levels of liquidity, appropriate levels of cash reserves, and meeting our debt-related targets. And we'll talk more about that because we have certain debt objectives, which leads into our funding recommendations for the additional cost. And speaking of debt, and we've talked about this, that over time we're looking to bring down our level of absolute debt. And we showed a chart back in November that compared KUB with our peer utilities on debt per customer, and we were highest among our peer utilities. And that is something that just sort of reinforces what Standard & Poor's and Moody's have been telling us for several years, that basically your systems have above average debt profiles. Well, there's a cost of using debt, of course, with interest rates and borrowing cost. And interest rates goes up, the higher the borrowing cost that we have to pass on to our customers. So long term, we want to do that. Over the course of the 8 years that we're talking about, or really through FY30, in total, it's a net increase in debt. Some systems are going down, a couple of systems are going up in electric and water. But this is a long-term objective that once we get past FY30, that even those systems would begin to trend down over time as well. So the price tag of the impacts of inflation and our increase in Century 2 spending, broken down by system, totals $473 million. This is over an 8-year period, FY23 to 30, so a certain amount of this has already occurred, but the majority by far is yet to come. So you can see it broken down by division, but we have to find funding for electric for $245 million, for gas $62 million, for water $87 million, for wastewater $79 million. So that's a lot of millions. That's a lot of dollars on that. Before we go in and look at the actual financing plans, I guess this is our final funding recommendations. We had preliminary recommendations in January. Just to reset, because these financial planning guidelines, these targets, these indicators guide us in developing what that funding plan is. For instance, and you can see the table on the right-hand side of the chart that really lays out the specific numbers. I won't go through all of those, but we need to hit our minimum operating cash levels for our systems. And you can see those amounts varies depending upon the size. We need to maintain, we're required to maintain 60 days of contingency cash reserves. Those are restricted, basically, 60 days of operating expenses. And then something that we're looking to actually have over time and increase over time is what we call unrestricted contingency cash reserves, improve the financial flexibility of our systems. For example, today electric has 0. Our goal is to get that to 20 million by 2030, and you can see what the other systems goals are. And then on the outstanding debt, this really is a driver of our plans, is by 2030, we want to have no more than 500 million electric, no more than 50 million gas, 235 water, 425 for wastewater. So the financing plans I'll show you here in just a moment are predicated on those levels or being under those levels. As we go through the financial planning process, we've done this multiple times, but updating our revenue projections. We did it in the fall. We did it again here in the last couple of months. And that's important because, as you may recall, and we'll talk about here in just a moment, for water and wastewater, we've had significant increases in our revenue projections compared to 2023, okay? And we've seen several years of this proving out, so we're projecting that trend. But when we talked about finding $87 million more in funding for the water system, $79 million more for wastewater, revenue growth is a big part of that, and it makes an impact on the level of rate increases. So that's that. So we'll start going through the financial plans, beginning with the electric system. So again, to reset our FY23 plan from a financing perspective, we were going to do $339 million in new bonds, and pretty close to our maximum threshold, 491, but we had no rate increases over this period of time. The 3% that you've approved, it all have gone into effect, so there was nothing. Now we have $245 million in additional funding, and actually it's a little bit more than that. When we updated our revenue projections for all of our systems, whereas gas was about flat, water was up a decent amount, wastewater up a decent amount, electric came down some. So this is just cost. If you throw a $25 million revenue decrease into that, you're really looking for $270 million. Okay. So the debt really didn't change. This is a little bit higher because of timing of when the debt is issued. So really nothing to come from debt. So it is coming from these recommended rate increases. That's where you're getting your whole $270 million from. And that is a 4% for FY25, a 3% for FY26, and a 2% for FY27. And we'll talk more about effective dates, but when we're looking at what those are, it's April of 25, April of 26, and April of 27. So the first one would not go into effect until a year from now. One other point I wanted to make, and Gabe touched upon this in his commentary, is that this is the one financing plan that has a little change from what we showed the board in January, and that is with this rate increase right here. This was 1%, what we discussed in January. We're now recommending that to be 2%. So what changed? Well, over the last couple of months, we've done further refinements, revised projections for our plans, and so costs went up a little bit and revenues went down too. So this provides, going from 1% to 2%, provides about an additional $25 million in revenue for the electric plan to plug that gap. So that's electric. On gas system, $62 million in total funding increase. You can see from the FY23 plan, we did have some debt. No, we actually had no new debt planned to be issued over that period of time. And we were going to end below our 50 million target. And then we had no rate increase in FY25, and you can see what they were for the other years. So $62 million. We did add a little bit of debt to the plan, and the revenue increases were just about $3 to $5 million. So most of that $62 million is coming from an acceleration and a slight elevation of rate increases. So where we had those 2s, those are now 3s, and then we had to have a rate increase in FY25 as well. So basically what we're going to be asking the board to consider at the May meeting on first reading are 3% rate increases for the natural gas system. For water, total funding increase above the FY23 plan is $87 million. So I'm just going to jump over here to the rate increases because you can see there is no change. What we would have been recommending for 26, 27, and 28 were 3.6%. That has not changed. That is what we're still recommending. So how did we fund $87 million? Well, some we did increase the amount of debt. We used some of our debt capacity on that, but we're up to the maximum threshold at $235 billion. So there's an increase of $33 million in debt. So that funds a portion of it. That still leaves $54 million. And how are you going to fund that? And that becomes from updating our sales revenue projections. What we have seen over the last several years, and we're projecting this forward, is greater growth and also per capita use for customers, particularly among our commercial customers, has grown. So it's basically resetting that base and then going back to historical growth projections and assumptions. But resetting that base brought in a significant amount of revenue to the water system. So if you didn't have that, and we were still at our same projected revenue levels from back in 2023, and we're still going to do everything that we wanted to get inflation and do some additional Century 2 investments, these, instead of being 6%, are probably above 10%. So thankful for those revised revenue projections for water. And the same is true for wastewater as well, even actually to a larger extent. And again, we have $79 million in additional funding from inflation and Century 2. We're not changing the debt issuance from what we had planned 2 years ago for this period of time. So we're going to still end at $414 million. That's a little bit below our maximum threshold, which is good. But the rate increases, particularly for the next 3 years, are the same as what they were in the 2023 plan. A little bit higher in these outer years, but what we're asking you to approve at next month's meeting are these 3.2%. Again, the same. No new debt. So where are you getting $79 million to fund that? Same story as water. Revised revenue projections are the driver there. And again, if you didn't have that, and you had the same revenue levels as 2 years ago, these are a lot higher than 2%. So we're thankful for that. So obviously we take rate increases very seriously, and we try to minimize as much as possible. And I'm just glad that these revised revenue projections really helped on water and wastewater. We're still needing to raise rates to fund much of what John and Kurt talked about, but we're able to absorb a fair amount of that $473 million through revenue increases. Any questions on that? Okay, so this chart brings it all together, and what we're coming to the board next month on first reading to approve rate increases. The top table shows what the percentages are, and we've gone through those. The bottom table shows the projected monthly bill impacts of those increases. So let's talk just for a moment about effective dates for this. So I talked about electric, but again, this would go into effect in April of 25, April of 26, April of 27. For gas, the timing's a bit different. This would be the earliest one, October of 24, and then October of 25, October of 26. And then for both water and wastewater, those first go into effect July of 25, so over a year from now. July of 25, July of 26, and July of 27. And we talked about this before, but you can see there's shifts. That's just the effective dates. You cross over different fiscal years, so that's why the table looks as if it does. So those are the effective dates, and then you see the monthly bill impacts. So for the average residential electric customer, by April of 27, these increases would have added over $11 to the monthly bill. For gas, those three increases actually add up to about $5.85. So by October of 26. And by July of 27, water, $6.45 more, wastewater, $4.50 more. Now, it's easy to add all those up and say, well, that's $28, so all our residential customers are going to see more than $28 increase. And that's not true, because you may recall from previous presentations when we look at our customer who gets what and who has what services, there's less than 20% of our total of residential customers in our service areas that have all four services. So it'll be a mix and match, because some of these depend where you live out west. You may have first utility district for water and wastewater. So got that? Okay. So we did update our residential bill comparisons with our peer utilities for electric, gas, water, and wastewater. And this shows all increases that have already been approved by the board. So there's still one for water and wastewater that goes into effect this July. Okay. And you can see what our competitive position is. For electric, we compare against the big 9 utilities. So that's Memphis, Nashville, Chattanooga, several of the large co-ops. Gas, it's regional gas distribution companies in our region, our area. And then for water and wastewater, it is the local utility districts. So it's Hallsdale Pow, it's First Utility, it's West Knox Utility, Knox Chapman. So we submit that this current snapshot that we are in a competitive range with our peer utilities. Wastewater may be a bit of an exception for that. We know the reasons for that with the consent decree and all those rate increases that we had to have. But even so, with wastewater, you can see both West Knox and Hallsdale Powell have been, if you want to say, gaining ground on us, coming closer to us. So this chart does not reflect the numbers that we showed on the previous chart when we were adding those amounts up. So, if you add $11 to electric from this, you could say, well, then you would be the highest. Well, not necessarily, because another thing we talked about back in November was sort of a survey of our peer utilities in many ways, and they are raising rates too. MLGW, Memphis Light, Gas, and Water, as a board's already approved, City Council's approved a 12% electric rate increase over a 3-year period. And I know Huntsville's not on the chart for water because those are just the utility districts. They have a 35% water rate increase has been approved. And in particular for water, something that Standard & Poor's has told us here in the last several months was the average water rate increase for the utilities they look at across the nation is 6%, and that's what ours are. So everybody is raising rates for inflation and also hopefully to make their systems more resilient. That's a big part of what MLGW's rate increases are for. So, if we looked at this 3 years from now, how is our competitive position going to change? We don't really know the answer to that. But it's not that big. It's not going to be where we're doing what we're doing and nobody else is doing nothing. So it may well sort of look the same from a competitive standpoint. One thing I'll point out on gas, these levels, and of course this would apply to everybody on this chart and others. Currently, natural gas commodity prices are just plummeting. And we've seen levels, I started out here working on the gas side of the house, and we've seen commodity prices below. I remember back in those days, if we saw $1.50 or $2, we were high-fiving each other. That was great and awesome. And now we're seeing it down around 70 cents a decatherm, which is just unheard of. Over my tenure, we've seen it as high as $15 a decatherm, and I know that decatherm is a unit of measurement for natural gas, but bottom line is that's good news for our gas customers. So in spite of some of these rate increases we're having, the biggest portion of their bill is the overall commodity cost, what we're buying from Chevron or Shell or whomever the case may be. Those prices are going down, so that helps. Yes, and TVA on TVA's fuel cost, which is a portion of what we pass on to our customers, is at its lowest level in 3 years. And that's in part because natural gas as well, that's becoming a bigger source of their cost of generation, right? So that's bringing down their fuel cost. So, there's good news in there as well. So just a quick summary of our long-range financial plan update. Again, $473 million in added costs from 2 years ago. We've talked about how we're going to fund that through some moderate increase in debt, but rate increases and then increased system revenues as well, particularly for water and wastewater. As we look forward to the next 6 years in our long-range plan, our total capital spend, and John and Kurt and Jamie summed this up individually, but it's $1.6 billion in total. It's not on the chart, but our total O&M over that period of time is $1.4 billion. So over those 6 years, for our 5 systems combined, you got $3 billion in various investments in our utility systems. And that's pretty significant for that. To help fund the $1.6 billion capital program, we're going to issue $370 million in new debt over that period of time. So our total debt by 2030 is $1.2 billion. So where we are today, and this is getting a little bit more details, we're at $1,137 million in outstanding debt. By 2030, we're going to be at $1,187 million in outstanding debt. So a $50 million net increase. Electric's going up, water's going up somewhat, wastewater and gas are coming down on that. But again, long-term objective is for them all to have a downward trend. As you know, our financing plan does include annual rate increases, and we are recommending adoption of 3 years of increases for electric, gas, water, and wastewater, and we have seen what those amounts and bill impacts are. And then finally, our first year of the 6 years going forward has a budget of $1.2 billion. And I will provide, I know you'll look forward to this, and Celeste will miss it, I know, but we'll have a more detailed presentation on the $1.2 billion budget at the May meeting. But I am obligated to provide you some information on the FY25 budget today. Again, it's $1.2 billion. It is up $66 million or 6% over our current year forecast of cash expenditures. O&M is a driver for that. Part of that's inflation. Part of that's just planned increases in our staffing as well. I think on average we'll have 60 more full-time employees in FY25 compared to FY24. That's another big part of the O&M increase. Almost a $300 million capital budget. The big components you can see on the slide, Century 2 is almost half of that, and then fiber's a good portion of that too, and that's fiber backbone and fiber services to the home, the 9200 or 9300 that Jamie talked about. There's a capital component for that. To help fund that, $111 million in new bonds next year, $91 million electric, and $20 million for water. So we will be going, as we look at our cash flow projections and we get into the details of FY25, we are going to be going to the bond market probably earlier than we have in prior years, as our systems are needing the cash a little bit quicker than what we've seen. We've usually gone around October, November. We're going to be going probably in August. So we'll be going to City Council sooner than we typically do as well on that. And then you can see what our budgeted interest rate is on the new bonds at 4.5%, and we hope to certainly best that. Real quickly, looking at the proposed budget by system, electric is the biggest because of wholesale power cost. It's a $793 million budget in FY25. Fiber's $28 million. Gas is $135 million. Water is $120 million. Wastewater is $127 million. So that's how it breaks out, because as you know, each budget, each division has their own, needs to have their own budget. Could it die on me? There we go. So real quickly, the $66 million increase, breaking down by major cost component, wholesale energy is projected to be up $13 million. That's because we're adding 4,000 new customers, electric and gas combined. That's the driver there. O&M up $21 million over the current year forecast. That's staffing, that's inflation on materials as well. Capital up $18 million, that's just really timing of capital projects. The filter project, as we begin to bring that home, we got about $30 million in the budget for the water filter project for FY25. Debt service is up $5 million, that's $111 million in new bonds. Taxes and equivalents up $4 million. That's just capital work, continued investments in our utility systems, which increases our in lieu of tax payments to the various taxing jurisdictions on that. Then the loan to fiber from electric. In total, TVA has approved electric to loan $55 million for that. Some of that loan has already taken place. Next year, $11 million is budgeted for that. And so just comparing to what it was, because that is part of the budget appropriation for the electric division. So they loaned $7 million this fiscal year, so there's a $4 million increase for that. So how the FY25 budget will be funded, as usual, largely, almost 90% through system revenues, about $1.05 billion of the $1.2 billion through system revenues. 9% or $111 million is coming from the bonds. Those two right there is 96% of the funding. One thing I will point out is that grants, we hope for that number to become bigger and bigger as years goes by. That's going to be about $20 million of the total budget funding. And we do have several applications that are in process or have already been filed on that. And that really does become, I had it on the slide, I didn't really talk about it, another part of our financing strategy, because whatever you can get to help defray some of these costs is a good thing for our customers. So we're very active in that space. So any questions on that? Okay. So May board meeting will be a busy meeting. We'll actually have anywhere from 8 to 9 resolutions for you to vote on. The first item here, and this is something we're going to talk with the audit committee about in more detail at our May 2nd meeting, but we do need additional budget appropriations for the current fiscal year for the wastewater division, just higher operating expenses than anticipated, probably around $3 million. We'll go through that with the audit committee, and then that'll be part of the presentation we make in May to let you know that. Then we'll have, obviously, the approval of the FY25 budget, FY25 commitment appropriations, the Bill Coley's favorite resolution of all time, and then $111 million in new bonds for electric and water combined, and then we'll have the electronic document Debbie will send out will be massive, because we'll have all the rate schedules for all the divisions, and you'll see some repetition because you'll be approving a rate schedule to go in effect, say for residential electric in April of 25, April 26, April 27, multiply that over all 4. So it's going to be a large packet. So we'll have the rate increases, and then we'll actually have probably 3 resolutions for other rate-related items. A couple of those we've talked about, like the new EV fast charging pump station rate, the amendment to the purchase power adjustment, which is related to retaining the savings from the 5% flexibility as those projects eventually come online, and one other that we're working on related to TVA's new interruptible pricing products. So it'll be a lot of votes on that, and probably a busy meeting. But anyway, that's all I have. Be happy to answer any questions. We appreciate the board's consideration of all our funding recommendations, in particular the rate increases. Nobody likes to raise rates, but obviously we've had significant impacts on inflation, and we do feel that we need to have those additional Century 2 investments on that. And again, it all gets back to that balanced approach. I'm trying to talk 3 more minutes to get us to right to 12, but balanced approach to, between having those resilient, reliable systems still having affordable rates for our customers and keeping the financial health of our systems intact as well. So that's all I have.
Any other questions from anybody? I just want to thank you all because you did an incredible job of getting a lot of information into this time and answering a whole lot of questions from us. So, and you can't do that unless you do a lot of planning and organization before the fact. So I think we all recognize that. So thank you all. Turn it back over to Gabe.
I'll finish it up. So every year, just to really echo what you're saying, a lot of folks, especially this past year, probably the biggest lift we've ever had that I can remember. We had so many folks involved in looking at what's going on in the world and to us and to our customers. And so I want to say thank you to a lot of folks. Instead of reading off all the names, by the time you get to the 10th name, you lose track. And so I want to just put their names up there, and that's just broken out by divisions. There are also folks below them that probably help pull together certain project numbers or certain initiative numbers, but those folks did a phenomenal amount of work really over the last fiscal year, 12 months of work to get this together. You've seen pieces of it throughout the last 6 months, but I want to say thank you for all these folks. It's one of those things that we felt important to do. You all told us it was very important to do, and we succeeded doing it. So the work's still ahead of us to execute on the plan, but really these folks have invested a lot of hours in their time to make sure we were spot on our budget and our forecasts. So thank you to all those folks there. And that's all I have. So.
Commissioners, there's been a box lunch ordered for everyone here. So you have the option of either staying to have your lunch here in an additional lunch session that's open for the public to observe, or you can take your lunch with you if you have other obligations. This meeting is now adjourned.